in the past physical events and sometimes associated with our conference. Yeah, I see the recording. We are recording this session. This is just a heads up to all, because we have received requests from people that it is just difficult or impossible to join at this time today for us to record this, so that we can share afterwards, and also for yourself to be able to come back to some of these things. If you want to distribute it further, you're most welcome. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have this session annually at least, typically with our conference, but these days with virtual setups, it's easier to just dedicate a specific time. We had our last engagement session almost exactly a year ago. I think it was the 23rd of March 2021 that we had this session. And I just want to clarify something right from the beginning. I think maybe sometimes there's a bit of a confusing message on what we call the session. Sometimes we call it an industry session or a public sector session or so. I've now resorted to call it our non-academic user session, because we are looking at two types of users of CHPC here. And this is our industry, which can be private sector or commercial users. That's the one segment of users. And then we're also looking at our public sector users that are not academic. We've got quite a number of them. And we group this together in what we then call, or what I call, our non-academic user session. But if you see any other reference to this session, whether we call it the industry session or non-academic user session, this means the same thing. Of course, the purpose of this session is very much about having a dedicated discussion with a segment of users that are different to the bulk of our users. The bulk of the users of CHPC is, of course, from the academic sector. And we would like to dedicate time to our non-academic users. So I'm just quickly going to show you the agenda for today. Charles has sent it out, and maybe just a comment or two. So I trust you can see my screen there. Just on the next page. So there is the agenda, and we purposefully have not put times to this, not to say that we want to talk endlessly on any particular topic. I think it is more to emphasize that this is very much an informal discussion that we want to have. Of course, we're going to present some aspects from our side. We also have some user presentations. So I will put, just the start of the agenda, I will put our Center Manager for Nikki's, Dr. Happy Sitori. I will give opportunity to speak shortly. He's second on the agenda. I want us all to just briefly introduce ourselves, just your name and institution that you are from, so that we know who is on the call. Then I will give a short overview presentation of the opportunities of industry or non-academic usage at the CHPC. Especially keeping in mind that we also have people that are joining us for the first time, that may have no real background of what the opportunities are. We also ask a few very specific users just to give some of their perspectives in terms of use of CHPC. Listed is Stefani, Zahid, and Sevas. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this, just to give a user perspective to all on the call. And then Charles Crosby, thanks Charles for organizing this and putting all the the communications out there for people to join. He will give us a bit of an overview of this survey that we held towards the end of last year, which was very much for the commercial users. In this case, it's specifically to our private sector users. And then it's open discussion. We will discuss any topics or so that you're picking up that you would like more information on. And yeah, we are looking towards the floor to raise issues or topics that you would like more clarity on. And we will end off once we are done talking. So we're not saying that this is a 3-hour session, not by all means. If we feel we have discussed what we wanted to by the end of the agenda, then we are done. So I trust this is in order. So I'm just going to stop share for the moment and then go to the next point on our agenda. And would like to welcome Dr. Happy Sitori, the Center Manager of Nikki's Happy. I think you are on the line. I saw you. Are you there, Happy?
Yes, Werner, I'm here.
Thanks. So it's over to you, Happy, for some introduction.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly well.
Okay. Now, colleagues, good morning all. And first of all, I would like to welcome you um, to this series of events that we host for CHPC, specifically looking at the needs for the non-academic use of high-performance computing, as Werner has articulated. I would like to, first of all, thank you for your consistency and continued support of this program. I have seen that the names that come here, these are the people that have been with CHPC for quite a long time, and also some new names, some new industries. So it's really pleasing to show that the reach out of this program is extending in various industries. And that is exactly the intent of us having high performance computing in South Africa. As much as we would like to make sure that we have got the academic users who continue providing the skills, pushing new frontiers in terms of the use of high performance computing, the ultimate goal where we would see the importance of high performance computing is how does it impact to our industries, because that's where the men and women on the street will be able to see it with new jobs coming, new products arriving, new services coming into the country. So I would really say you are the pioneers of that to make sure that we can be able to see what high performance can do for our country. And one of the things that especially after COVID-19, we have realized that a lot of industries that did not digitize, they struggled a bit. They were affected by the restrictions in movements, lockdowns. So those industries that could do everything digitally, they felt less effect. Some actually thrived. If you looked at, for an example, the retail now that went online, a lot of them were able, they did not see the effect. The products were flying from the shelves. So those are some of the things that just shows you that in digitizing your processes or digitizing how you do your business always helps, and that's a route to go. So I think that's one of the things that we're really looking at. And I can just indicate that as part of the government's plans in looking at now post the COVID-19, one of the things that is being looked at is the economic recovery plan. And within the economic recovery plan, the government is also looking at how high performance computing or big data analytics will play center stage. So I think it's a conversation that we need also to take into consideration. And your voice on this stage, where you should be able to indicate if there are any bottlenecks and how can we break those bottlenecks so that you can be able to contribute to this plan. It's very, very important. I would also like to share with you that as part of this, we keep monitoring on how we're progressing with this intention of making sure that we can support industry. So for that, then I'm talking to the converted here from industry. So you like measuring everything. So even on ourselves as a public sector, we have got the key performance indicators, and the performance of industry, or how we reach out to industry and how industry performs. It's also one of the indicators that we continuously monitor. And I can say that from our funder, which is the Department of Science and Innovation, that's one of the key things that we report on. And also our host institution, which is the CSIR, with its new strategy now, it's the focus on supporting industry. So we are looking at that, and also specifically looking at small medium enterprises. How do we bring them in? Because that's where we see the future of the success in terms of the economic recovery plan. That new small medium enterprises will come, will create new jobs. So that is an indicator that we have to look at. Are we reaching out to this industry? So really this platform is to make sure that we understand how do we become effective and how do we support industry better so that we can see this change in our country. And obviously, I think besides just the change in our country, we'd like to see the success in your industries and in the best way that we can be able to support it. It's very important. I know that Werner and Charles and the team will be sharing with you the details of what they have in store for you. But I would just like to touch at a high level some of the plans going forward. And I think most of you did participate in our user forum where we're looking at our next plans in terms of high performance computing. So I can just indicate that we are still on the road for that to increase the capacity of the computing capability. Obviously, that will give you access now to newer technologies, and we believe with these newer technologies and increased capacity, you should be able to get your production faster and be able to do some more interesting things that you were never able to do. That's the whole intention. And I think you did contribute on what are your aspirations when we are looking at the new technologies. Those have been taken into consideration, and we're hoping to be able to meet that aspiration. I think with the new technologies that are coming, there's a big or a wide variety of options that can come. So it's really exciting times in terms of what one can be able to deploy. And one other thing, even if it is not immediately on our plans, we are aware also of some of the advances of quantum computing. So I'm saying not exactly in our plans in terms of the deploying the infrastructure, at least in the short term or medium term, but in the long term, that's something that we will look at. But what we're working on, it's constantly to look at how do we improve or how do we build up the skills of programming quantum computing. So our summer school that we hold every year at the beginning of the year is taking this into consideration in programming high performance computing systems, just to start on with Python and how can you be able to move programs on the quantum computer. So this part has already started, and it's something that we are going to be pushing. And obviously we're taking into consideration some of the programs or applications that can take advantage of quantum computers. And I think at the moment, some of those, for an example, beside cryptography, we have seen that in areas of material science, quantum chemistry, these are some of the applications that are being punted to be able to benefit on quantum computers. And we are paying special interest into that. So it's some of the things that we will be sharing with you when there are advances. But I can also indicate that as much as we're not yet looking at putting infrastructure, we do have some collaborators globally, and we are getting offers from various labs to say, join us in this program of our quantum computing. So we basically have got offers to have access to this infrastructure. So we can already start doing some of the testing in that aspect. So I think with all this, colleagues, I can just say that there are a lot of things coming in our way, and we would like to make sure that for our industry partners, these are some initiatives that we'd like to make sure that you benefit from them. So please feel free if there are other things that you think that will be important in future for your area, to be able, to make it visible so that we can pay attention to it. And I think some of the things that we normally hear now that constantly people bring in is now, how do we even integrate some of the routine work into our work flows? For an example, bringing in machine learning and AI into our workflows. I think those are some of the things that we would like to understand how best we can be able to support you. So I'm very confident the team here will be able to take your suggestions, and we look at it so that we can plan it into our final plans. And I can just say that we have not yet finalized our plan for the next 3 years. So this meeting is opportune to that whatever that comes out of here can still go into our plans, as this have not yet been finalized. So I wish you all the best in your discussions today. And as much as I would like to stay with you the whole day, I will sneak out since I have got some other engagements. But Werner and Charles and the team will be able to give me any feedback. And whenever I get some chance, I will rejoin to hear the discussions and participate. Thank you very much, Werner.
Thank you very, very much. Happy for setting the scene. I really appreciate you making the time to join us, even if it's just for a while. So thank you very much. We will now go to the next part of the agenda, and I would, even though it might take a little bit of time, I would just like us all to just introduce ourselves, that we just all know who are represented on this call. So if I can ask, I have a list here, probably the alphabetic list that I'm seeing. I'm just going to ask you to maybe just briefly say who you are, what entity or institution you are representing, and maybe just an indication of whether you represent, say, commercial or private sector, or maybe more formally public sector. But I think there's even 1 or 2 academics on the line. So even if you're from the academic environment and you join out of interest, it's also perfectly in order. So maybe I can just start, because I don't think I introduced myself. For those that don't know, I'm Werner Jansen van Rensburg, and I'm the research manager at the CHPC. So my responsibilities is all about supporting the users, no matter what domain you're from. At the CHPC. So I'm just going to go alphabetically, including some of our CHPC colleagues that's online. Charles, you are next on the call. I hope the people know who you are, Charles, but maybe you can just briefly remind them.
Hi, yeah, sorry to remind you of me. My name is Charles Crosby. I'm a science support engineer at the CHPC.
Thanks. Benjamin, you are next.
Hi, yes, I'm the software developer at the CHPC, also focusing on HDD work as well.
Thanks. Christian de Wet.
Hi everybody, my name is Christian de Wet. I work at Aerosem and I'm the sales manager from the commercial sector.
Thank you. Dora Tobier.
Thank you, Werner. My name is Dora Tolbe, the technical manager for the Center for High Performance Computing. I'm responsible for the infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Edward Rakate.
Thanks, Verna. My name is Edward Rakate. I'm the operations manager at CHPC. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily Liu.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Liu. I'm from Stamila, Africa. I'm a process engineer. I'm doing some simulation for boilers and some industry equipment. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. You're most welcome. Ernst Berger.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Ernst Berger. I represent Altair. So you interact with the system via the PBS scheduling system, which we provide to the CHPC. So I'm particularly interested in how you experience the system as a user, because that experience is something that we are very interested in. Thanks, Werner.
Thanks, Ernst. Ines Schippers.
Good morning, everyone. I'm an electronic engineer and I look mostly after the bioinformatics software and data.
Thanks, Ines. Ines, of course, from the CHPC. And then Janine Skumbi. Janine, are you there? Maybe she's just struggling for the moment. So let's go to Jessie Quick. Jessie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Jesse Quick from QFinsoft, and we are the suppliers of ANSYS and Rocky software to mostly commercial clients and then also to the academic clients in South Africa. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Kevin Colville. Kevin, are you there? Not sure whether Kevin is maybe struggling. He might be struggling a bit with his sound, but Kevin, I can just confirm Kevin is CHPC support scientist. He's looking mostly at computer science, applied mathematics, machine learning. So Kevin, I hope that does justice to your introduction. Krishna Govender.
Hi everyone, I'm Krishna. I'm from the CHPC as well. I support the computational chemistry and material science users at CHPC. I'm also involved in HCD and I'm also actively involved in my own research.
Thanks, Krishna. Janine, I'm just checking with you again if you can get the audio going. But it seems, Janine Skumbi, you are maybe not coming through. Louis Lafranci. Louis.
Hi, Werner. I'm Louis Lafranci from Northwest University and a researcher in fluid dynamics. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think maybe just to put in perspective, Louis is, although he's from Northwest University, he has a formal commercial usage program at CHPC. So that's why, Louis, I assume you are, of course, in the session. And this is a topic that we can also discuss, the context of how you, even at university, can make use of the CHPC in a commercial way. Then the only name I see Malima M. I'm not sure what the full name is, but you are welcome to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Malima Ano. I'm affiliated with the Agricultural Research Council. So we use the CHPC to do our biological analysis. And thank you very much for the way that you maintain the system.
Thank you, Malima, from the ARC. Next, I see Mpumelelo Dube.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mpumelelo Dube. I'm from the Council for Geoscience. I'm a new user. Basically, we are running a geophysical model for the CHPC.
Thank you, Mpumelelo. CGS is we have a strategic partnership with CGS, so I'm very pleased that you are represented here. Dumiso Mtembo. Dumiso.
Okay, thanks, Werner. Good morning, everyone. Dumiso Mtembu. I work for Epsilon Engineering as an aeronautical engineer. We predominantly use SHPC for CFD simulations. with specific application in aerospace engineering.
Thanks, Ndumiso. And next is Imran Parker. Imran.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Imran Parker. I'm a senior mechanical engineer at De Beers Marine. We've been using the CHPC for predominantly doing CFD simulations of multi-phase flows. And we're really using the facility as a berth capacity. Thanks.
Thanks, Imran. Quinn Reynolds.
Hi, thanks, Werner. Yes, okay. My name is Quinn Reynolds from Mintech in Johannesburg. We're one of the government science councils. We do research into mineral processing and metallurgy applications. My main focus area is high temperature applications. I'm a technical specialist in the pyrometallurgy department, and we do computational and numerical modeling of complex computational mechanics and multi-physics problems. Thanks.
Thanks, Quinn. Good to have you on the call. Rajana Mapanga. Rajana, are you there?
Yes. Good morning. I'm Regina Mapanga from Next Generation Enterprises and Institution of the CSIR. I'm a research group leader and a principal researcher at the Design and Optimization Research Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Robin Jordy. Welcome to the call. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Werner. My name is Robin Jordy. I'm a process engineer working for the Sasol Group, and I'm essentially one of the in-house CFD specialists, effectively dealing with CFD applied to process equipment and associated technologies.
Thanks, Robin. Good to see you on the call. Then Ron Machaka.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ronald Machaka. I'm based at the CSIR. I am a principal researcher here, also a visiting associate professor at UJ. I've used the CHPC, a couple of times for different things. I'm all over the place. I do mainly material science and metallurgical stuff there. Machine learning and possibly what I'm bringing next is reconstruction of some tomography data from the ESRF. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ronald. Good to see you. Sivis van Sail.
Yes, good morning. I'm Sivis van Sail, a mechanical engineer at Greenplan Consultants. We work primarily in the built environment, in which case we sometimes do CFD simulations for smoke extraction and wind studies. And I'll be discussing a bit further later today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sivis. Shoni Zwane.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shoni Zwane. I'm a researcher at the ARC. In Irene, and we use the HPC to analyze the livestock genomics data. Thank you.
Thank you, Shoni. Good to see you. Eric Mbele.
Thanks, Verna. Morning, everyone. Eric Mbele, Systems Administrator at CHPC. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Stefanie Landman.
Yes, good morning. Stephanie Landman. I work at the South African Weather Service.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Terence Chan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Terence, and I'm an aeronautical engineer at Cinnamon-Teal Aerospace, CTA for short, and I specialize with CFD simulations.
Thank you, Terence. And I think second to last, Vian van der Merwe.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Vian van der Merwe from Aerotherm, and we use CFD for a wide variety of projects in the engineering industry.
Thank you, Vian. And then last on my list is Zahid Ibrahim.
Good morning, everyone. Zaid Ibrahim. I'm representing eScience Associates on the commercial sector, mainly do air quality modeling on the CHPC system. Thank you.
Thanks, Zaid. So I hope I have not missed somebody. Did somebody join? I think they might have joined a person. Please, if anybody has been missed, please introduce yourself. You can just talk. I think we haven't heard from Janine. I don't know whether she's got her sound sorted. Oh, Janine, you are back. You are on now.
Sorry, I'm back. Apologies.
Good.
Okay, yeah. So I work with Terence at CTA. Yeah, we mainly use the CHPC for CFD analyses, focusing on aerospace applications.
Thank you very much, Janine. Is there anybody else that I missed? You are welcome to just speak up. Otherwise, I think we've got everybody. So thank you very much. I think this sets the scene. We've got a very good representation, I think, from private sector to public sector. We have some representation of CHPC colleagues on the line. So we are all available, of course, today to discuss whatever topic comes up. So thank you very much. Next on the agenda is a presentation, but please, I don't want it to be too formal, but I will present some slides that some of you might have seen before, but I also keep in mind that some people are joining us for the first time. So I'm giving a bit of general background to CHPC, but focusing a bit specifically on our non-academic users and some practical aspects. So I will put up those slides now and do the presentation. But if anybody wants to interrupt at any point, please do so. I always appreciate a discussion more. So Charles, I will ask you to check if somebody puts up their hand also to just stop me, because I might not be able to see it if the presentation is shared. So let me just get that up. Okay, so I trust you can see these slides. Charles, can you maybe just confirm again?
Aren't visible.
Thanks. Just get my pointer sorted. There it is. Okay, so just an overview of this presentation. I will give you a little bit of background on the CHPC and NICIS, our hosting entity, a little bit on CHPC compute resources, what we have currently, and also what we are looking towards at the future. A little bit on CHPC users and the utilization of the CHPC, of course, focusing on the users more that's on this call, the non-academic users, as I pointed out in the next bullet there. And then just summarizing some of the practical CHPC access and support. So this is more information to be kept on the slides, but I will share these slides with you in PDF format shortly after the talk. So everybody will be able to download it straight away. So if I skip over a few things, you will have in your own time, you can look at it. So apologies for people that have seen this a few times, but for people that's relatively new, just a quick introduction. The Center for High Performance Computing is a national high performance computing facility funded by the South African government, of course, through the Department of Science and Innovation. So we like to refer to the CHPC, of course, as the supercomputing facility for the country. There's not another supercomputer facility, there's only one, and it's hosted by the CHPC, specifically where the focus is to provide resources on a national level for the research community. So the CHPC is forming part of a broader entity that is actually funded by the DSI, which we call the National Integrated Cyber Infrastructure System. So it's a mouthful, and we like to use the acronym NICIS. And you also see a few years ago, we changed the branding so that this is very prominently reflected there in the branding. I will say something about NICIS just now, but of course, Dr. Happy Sitole that joined us right at the beginning is the center manager for whole of NICIS, of which the CHPC forms part. But overall, NICIS is administered through the CSIR, so that is our hosting entity. Coming back to CHPC specifically, even before NICIS existed, the CHPC as an entity started operations already in June 2007. So yeah, what is it? It's going for 15 years now. So we've got a long track history on provisioning HPC resources already. And I say until recently, we hosted the largest HPC system in Africa. We kept the #1 spot in Africa for a very long time, but we know now that there's a new system in Morocco that is slightly larger and faster. But maybe it's only because our system is aging a bit and we will upgrade soon. But it's just to emphasize that when it comes to provisioning of supercomputing or HPC resources, the CHPC is recognized as the leader on the continent for this. At the CHPC, we have a total number of about 35 employees, and it's divided into or grouped into 3 areas: research, technical, operational. So you saw I'm responsible for research. Dora introduced herself. She's responsible for technical, the technical team, and Edward Rakate is responsible for the operational team. So we've got all legs represented in the call today. So just coming back on to NICIS, this National Integrated Cyber Infrastructure System, I think it is, we need to give credit to the Department of Science and Innovation for the vision to fund this. This is a national funded entity, NICIS, for cyber infrastructure, where we focus on 3 legs. The CHPC is the computing services component, but there's 2 other very important components: the networking services, the South African National Research Network. And this is a network that connects all, or practically all, public and academic institutions in South Africa. So unfortunately, private sector entities do not necessarily benefit directly, but when it comes to public sector and academic institutions, being able to transfer data across the country to different entities is extremely efficient with Sunrain. This is part of NICIS, the networking services, and then the other component is, of course, the data services, or the RISA, the Data Intensive Research Initiative of South Africa. So it focuses on all aspects related to data, not only the provisioning of say, storage infrastructure, but also on how to deal with data and the growth of big data in general. So I think the important message here is that it is 3 legs to cyber infrastructure, of which the CHPC is what we are talking about today. But it is recognized, of course, that the CHPC will not be able to provide an efficient service if we do not have the networking and data services forming part of this. So that is why we recognize NICIS, and the DSI also funds this then directly. Okay, so back to the CHPC. What is our mandate? What are we there for? And I put always this first bullet. It's the research enabler in the country for HPC. So if anybody can benefit their research from HPC, we enable them to do it efficiently. And I think we emphasize and able to highlight that the CHPC is not there to do our own research. Of course, we do some of this, but this is not our main mandate. Our main mandate is to enable others. And we provision these computational resources to a broad sector of users. Of course, the South African academic community, yes. Also an important and growing number of African partner countries that form part of the SKA partner countries, but also the broader SADC region is benefiting from access to the CHPC and many other programs where we assist these countries with commissioning of resources. And then, of course, the non-academic and public sector users, this is what the focus is for today. And this is an important component of the user base. And this research enabling role we do fourfold. Of course, obviously, the first is to give access to the HPC hardware infrastructure, but it doesn't stop there. We do realize that to do effective support, you also need to support the codes, whether it is our installation or usage of these codes. All of that, we have many users that need further assistance to optimally make use of the infrastructure. So we support that. We also have dedicated research domain area support. So this is where you saw some of the research scientists of CHPC on this call, where they support, whether it is now CFD or chemistry or bioinformatics, they do support those domains to even assist users further. And this also pertains to the public and private sector users. And then a very important fourth component of our role is to provide training and education, or what we refer to as human capital development. Of course, very much focus on HPC. So I hope that summarizes it in a nutshell. This slide is becoming a bit old now, but this is what we have. This is our Lengao CPU cluster. It's called Lengao, of course, Setswana word for cheetah, with the emphasis not only on being fast, but on being the fastest. And I don't know what we will call our next system, probably the Ling 2, because it's going to be even faster than this fastest one. So I'm just summarizing when we commissioned the full cluster was commissioned in 2017. The first phase of this was already in 2016. It's a petaflop system. And at that stage, when we commissioned it, it put you quite high up on the top 500 list in the world. We came in at 121st, but we've since dropped off the list, of course. If you don't add to these resources, you drop off the list. These days, to just get on the top 500 list, I think you need to commission a system almost 1.5 petaflops in size just to get into the spot number 500. But this is not the goal. The goal, it is just to emphasize that when we commissioned this, and still the same message today is that this is a state-of-the-art facility where the whole country can benefit from. But this is not the only resource. Okay, this slide is maybe a bit busy, but this is just a summary of what we have on the Ling cluster. 1,368 nodes, that was what we commissioned in 2017. Some of these nodes are not available anymore, but we are still above 1,300. And with an aging cluster, some nodes are not replaced anymore, but the bulk of the cluster is still in use. It counts to about just below 33,000 calls. And maybe just some other aspects to note is the InfiniBand interconnect 56 gigabits per second. When we commissioned this 7 years ago, this was state of the art. Today, you can get clusters that's slightly faster or significantly faster, but this is still supporting our users quite well. Of course, this is what makes it an HPC cluster, is the fact that all the nodes are interconnected in a very low latency, high bandwidth connection with InfiniBand. We have a Lustre parallel storage system of about 4 petabytes that the users benefit from. So that is just to summarize some aspects of the cluster. Some other resources that we have and which you'd like this community to, of course, take note of if you're not aware yet. We do have a dedicated GPU cluster. It is limited. It's only got 30 NVIDIA V100 cards, and it is used quite significantly. We already commissioned this in September 2018, and the demand is usually split between our chemistry users doing molecular dynamics and, of course, machine learning. This is available for use also for public and private sector users. So if you're not aware of it, please talk to us. I also need to mention that the newest contribution to our resources is since March 2020, just before COVID lockdown, we commissioned what we now call the Nikki's Production Cloud, and it's got a name. It's called Sabawa. And this is a limited resource to start off with to provide cloud resources. And again, this community can benefit. If you're not aware of this resource and you need to provision very specific environments for workflows that you need to do, please come and knock on our door and we can see how we can help you. As I said, it's limited at this stage, but there is capacity on the system if some of you need to use it. So this is more or less a quick summary of the resources that we currently have. If we just look at what the future will bring, and some of these things that we mentioned, we would have liked to implement already, but it's not quite there yet. We are looking, or have been looking over the last few months at the new Lustre file system we call Lustre 3P. There were some challenges with deployment last year, so we took it offline again, but the plan is still to deploy this to alleviate Lustre storage challenges. We also have from DERISA, the other leg of Nikki's, what we call an 8 petabyte IROT storage. It's like an intermediate storage facility. And when I say to be deployed, it means it's already bought. We already have the equipment. It is just in a deployment phase. It's not made available to users yet. Some testing and so on going on. But this will increase the capacity, at least, of users looking for more storage. We're also looking at the expansion of the Nikki's Production Cloud. Already that equipment is it's to be deployed. We refer to this as pre-production at the moment. So this, I think the cloud expansion of Nikki's is a key component of expanding what Nikki's wants to do more of going forward. And this is, of course, not only an HPC focus. It's a cloud service provisioning that we are driving quite a bit that involves CHPC, DERISA, and Sundering. So you can keep your eye open for this. And then some procurements that's in the pipeline. It still needs to be procured, so it will take some time. A longer-term archival storage, it can be anything from 20 to 40 petabytes. That is probably what we will get. So that is to really complete the offering of the hierarchical storage management. So giving different tiers of storage to users. This is for the whole of Nikki's, but of course for CHPC users to benefit directly. And then I think the big one is our next HPC cluster. We are looking towards the procurement of a 4 petaflop cluster. So it is at least 4 times more performance than we have at the moment. This procurement still needs to happen, so it will take some time, but it is definitely part of the plans that's been approved to do this. So I think in any HPC center, the lifetime of a compute system or hardware, there are cycles for this, and we are now at the 6th or 7th year of Lengao, and it's becoming overdue to make sure that we provision the new generation of system. So yeah, please keep your eye open for that. Maybe I just wanted to comment on other support infrastructure that will be happening. You're all, if you've been using the CHPC, we've all been impacted by load shedding and the fact that our on-site generator, electricity generator capacity is just not up to scratch to keep our whole cluster running when there are power disruptions. But I'm pleased to confirm that we are putting down a second 1 megawatt on-site generator. We already have one, and the second one will provide enough power to not only power the current facilities, but also for future expansions. And this project is nearing completion. The building is basically completed on site, and we hope to see this new generator to be installed very soon. So hopefully, let's say in 3 months or so from now, I don't have to send those messages anymore about 8 racks going down on Lengao, because for CHPC, it is really a message that we don't want to send. And then also another part that we need is, and you probably would have seen some communication about this, is challenges in terms of keeping our data center cool. The chillers on site is aged, and there's a specific chiller upgrade plan is also in place to make sure that that is not the component that then interrupts our usage. So I hope that gives you a quick overview of some of the plans that we have. Maybe just to confirm again, in terms of support, when it comes on the human side and the employees at CHPC, we have dedicated domain-specific scientists, engineers that represents all kinds of domains, whether it's from chemistry, material science, computational mechanics, physics, all the way. We don't necessarily have an on-site scientist or engineer in every single domain you can think of, but we would like to believe that we can support most domains, even if it's not in the direct expertise area of an on-site person. So please don't hesitate to approach us if you need support specifically domain-wise. Of course, technical support we've got. Sorry, is there?
Werner, can I interrupt you? We have a question from Quinn Reynolds.
Please, Quinn, proceed.
He's actually written it on the chat, so I'll read it to you. The storage developments are very interesting. How will those resources be made available to current CHPC users? And will there be some form of open access data repository as part of DERISA?
Yeah, to Quinn, I cannot necessarily give you the final or say the definitive answer, but the first goal, of course, from a CHPC perspective is that storage is accessible to CHPC users in a hierarchical facet. So it means that if you have data on Luster, you at least are in a position to move it, say, to our intermediate IROT storage. And if you've got something that you really want to keep secure for a longer time, then to also move it further in that tier to keep it in the archival storage. So that is the first goal from a CHPC perspective. Of course, from a DERISA perspective, the goal is much broader. Yes, supporting CHPC users is one part of it, but it's also to support so let's call it the big data user communities, even those that are not using HPC. And for that component, open access and open data is a very key component of how DERISA is planning this. I'm not sure if Happy is still on the call. You can maybe add, Happy, are you still there? I don't know whether you want to comment. He's Happy on the call.
No, Ben, I think it's that's sufficient how you covered it. Okay. And all what we can say is a long-term archival, it's for that data that people don't want it being deleted. So that will go into tape. And like you correctly indicated also, if you've got some of the data that you're not touching in a certain period, we will move it into the IRODs, which will be some medium-term data. So it is very important that, and I would take that for industry, you will only want to process and store the data at your own site. But if you require any services for long-term storage, feel free to reach out to us so that we can see how do we accommodate your request. Thank you.
Thanks, Happy. So yeah, I think the goal for us is to get this storage or data, our storage services up and running as soon as possible. I think this is one of the gaps in CHPC in the past where people are have challenges in the constraints that we have to put on our luster. So, but I hope that answers your question, but we hope to get this sorted, as I say, as soon as possible. And just in terms of just completing this part of from a human support perspective, we also have technical support, and we have representation here on this call also today. Of course, we have a team of system administrators and a technical team that ensures that our system is always up and running. And we also draw on their expertise whenever we need to do changes or implement maybe things that are not typical on the cluster. Please, we are open for those discussions, and we will involve this team. Also, of course, we have an advanced computer engineering laboratory, the ACE lab, which is very much focused on testing our new, say, the next generation architectures, not only hardware, but also software implementations, very much focused also on what is happening in the cloud provisioning space. And especially, I think for CHPC, what it means to say, well, provisioning HPC through cloud. So this is a lab that anybody can draw on. I mean, the main purpose is advising the CHPC and NICIs internally, but also for external support where people need solutions, say, for particular types of challenges. Please don't hesitate to talk to us. And then I just put this trainers. We don't have anybody at CHPC that's a full-time trainer. We draw on all of the above, the scientists, the technical support people, the ACE lab to do our training programs. Please be aware that this is an important part of the support we give. Okay, now just coming a bit specific to how the cluster is used. And what I did was last year, I showed up until basically when we had the meeting, 23rd of March, 21. So I picked this period. This also is in line with our own financial year, and that starts in the 1st of April and ends the 31st of March. So it almost, I mean, we're only 15 days short on the full year. So it basically gives us a full year picture on how the Lengao cluster has been used. This graph, I think, shows a picture that well, demonstrates how it is used. This is our total hours used. Maybe I can just say in this cycle, a total of 151 million core hours were used on Lengao, of which 80% is from our academic institutions, the South African academic institutions. So 80% of this cluster, and I think if you think about this cluster as a national facility that needs to support national research, it probably makes sense that this is what the kind of chunk should be. But of course, the other entities are very important. The public sector entities representing in this call today used about 6% of those hours for this period. The African partner countries increasing slightly, about 13% of this. And then the private sector entities, about 1%. So we can talk about this. Why is it so small? We've talked about it for a long time. And I can tell you this 1% has not changed a bit over the last, let's call it almost 6 years that we've been monitoring. It's always been around 1%. It seems like there's a bit of a challenge for us to increase it beyond this, so it's still extremely small. So in terms of the total number of programs, so all of you will know that you join the CHPC by registering a research program that might have a number of members, but the total number of active research programs that we have had on the CHPC in this, last year is 295. So it counts everything, all the academics and so on. So the non-academic programs totals about 54. So you can see it's not too big a percentage of this. So and then just summarizing what's here on the left is the public sector entities, about 5.6%, 8.5 million hours that's been used, the number of programs, unique entities. So for certain programs, for example, the CSIR might have 6 programs, or the ARC has 3 or 4 programs. So that's why the number is not the same. And I just want to say active refers to a program that has used at least 1,000 core hours. And 1,000 is not that many, but we need to make a cutoff somewhere to really call this active users. So for the private sector entity, about 1.5 million hours was used. 21 research programs, and this equates directly to 21 unique entities. So there's no private sector entity that's got more than 1 program. So this is the number: 21 active private sector entities and 15 active public sector entities that's represented in this meeting today. So this gives you a bit of an indication. And I just want to show, when it comes to public sector institutions, those 15 that I talked about yesterday, and I also listed them in terms of who used the most hours, and maybe it's not unsurprising. CSIR itself is using quite a bit, 2.4, but then it goes down. The South African Weather Service is particularly active. Mintech using quite a number of hours, and then it goes down. South African Astronomical Observation. The CHPC itself, we do have some research that we do, but some of these hours also used for testing and so on. But yeah, it goes down ARC, MRC, and you can see the entities there, and some are using not very much. But in some cases, some entities don't need to use a lot of hours to do a lot of research. So it's a bit of maybe a skewed picture to show it like this. Private sector, as I said, 21 entities that we see is active, that use, say, more than 1,000 hours in this period. And there I list them all. So for you on the call, if you want to know how much hours are typically used more or less by others, by far the most is Johnson Matthey. They are using about 42% of the hours, and then Plenergy, that is the Stark Airs group for bioinformatics applications, used a lot. And I say Northwest University here, but this is, of course, Louis, this is your program, the commercial program that is treated exactly the same as all other commercial programs. They're in 3rd place, and then it goes down. And of course, what we see here, it changes from year to year. It, of course, depends on what projects entities need to run. Sometimes it will spike, and some will use a lot, and other times it is a bit more quiet. But I hope it gives you, I mean, also list the areas that they focus a lot. By far the most is in the computational mechanics and CFD space. So this is the dominant commercial usage. But we do have bioinformatics, environmental science, and of course the big one is Johnson Matthey at the top. I do want to show this picture. This is, I'm not showing it for the whole year. I'm showing it for the last 6 months. Otherwise it becomes a bit not quite so visible. But the picture, I think, is one that I would like to say the CHPC is not particularly pleased with. And there's different factors here. It's the total capacity usage on the Lingao cluster. Of course, we would like to see it hovering about 100% all the time. And we have seen that if you compare it, for example, to last year, that the overall capacity usage is lower. And you will see that where it levels off, it is typically where we cannot support the on-site power provisioning. So if we have load shedding incidents, we have very recently, we had a week or so where we lost capacity again due to load shedding, but it's not always load shedding. Sometimes, I know there was a period in December, for example, where we lost some access also due to network issues, but this is impacting all users, not only this sector of users. And we see that even when there are no disruptions, that the overall usage is not quite reaching the levels that we saw in the past. And I think it is impacting this, and this is something that we will investigate, of course, as CHPC. But we trust that once we have our challenges addressed, certainly from a power provisioning perspective, that we can be a bit more consistent. I'm just showing this graph at the bottom as well. This is just the total number of running and queued jobs at any time. And of course, any one of you can go and see these graphs on our user portal. So I just extracted it. If you want to go and play around, you can see it. And of course, whenever we are hit by, say, a load shedding incident, the capacity is just reduced, and we see the number of queue jobs increases. We saw it quite significantly the last about 2 weeks or last week or so, where there's quite high demand. And once we reach a stage where the black is so much higher than the blue, it means users are waiting. And this is what we would like to prevent, especially if it is due to a bit of an artificial reason. Of course, we have to switch off some racks. Okay, now I'm just going to end up with 1 or 2 slides, especially for those that are not so familiar with why private sector usage specifically. This is now specifically private sector. Those are the ones that do pay for the resources when it is used. Why is the DSI so keen for this to happen? It recognizes the need for the resource in the private sector, and it even allows us up to 30%. This is a lot. I mean, if you think at the moment it's 1%, it's not a case of that we are restricting private sector users in any way in terms of what we allow. This is something that can increase significantly. We do this by short-term agreements, so we never sign agreements longer than 12 months. We can do MOUs, but this is not typically it's the short-term agreements, and it's a very quick process to set this up. I just want to emphasize, this is non-profit for CHPC. We are fully a public entity, so we just deliver the service on a full cost basis. And it's a kind of, say, a cost recovery basis for CHPC. And it's also very convenient for the private sector user, pay as you use. You have an agreement. If you don't use any hours, there's no payment. You only pay for your hours retrospectively once you have used it, and then we invoice you. But I think the main point here is economic benefits for the companies through HPC. This is what the DSI wants. They want economic benefits for the country as a whole. So if you can increase the profitability of your business by tapping into this resource, that is where the success is, and what we would like to see. So I'm not going to go through all the next slide or two. It is just the practical offerings. You can go and look at it at your own time. I just want to highlight, of course, significant HPC hardware resources is provided. The in-house expertise, I talked about it already. There are people on site that's available to support, whether it's from software systems, open source tools, practical support, anything from licensing, and even if you need to put up SSH tunnels to get your offsite licensing sorted for your software, even advice on modeling and simulation strategies. We would like to see ourselves in a position to participate and assist you in those discussions, especially when it comes to involving commercial software vendors. We have very good relations. They are represented, all of them are represented, or most of them represented on this call, and we are very keen to be involved in discussions with these software vendors if that is somehow restricting your access and use of the CHPC. Again, the practical offerings, I think the main advantage for especially a private sector entity is that we provide this as a resource, so you can avoid the capital expenditure and also the time and effort to maintain your own system. So you can see it typically as just an operational expense. I mentioned this contract setup very quick. I hope everybody will agree that this is certainly not keeping us back. If you're a completely new entity and you need to do some work within the next day or two, we can make it happen. There's no lengthy engagements between legal departments to set up agreements. Of course, we are very open. If you want to come and just test, of course, even if we need to give you a little bit of free hours to make sure that you can use our facility properly, we are open to this. Due to the low, say, especially on the private sector, the low percentage capacity usage, we also have an express queue or a priority queue for private sector use. It essentially puts you on top of the queue, even if the cluster is used quite heavily. So that is another advantage. Yeah, I think the other things we touched on, I mean, just for us to be ready to engage and advise and so on, that is part of what we do. Okay, this slide I'm not going to talk about. This is just practical aspects. Anything that you need information on, scheduling, project procedures for register. So that's why I said I'm going to put these slides in the PDF. I will make the link available, and this is for you to go and look and follow some of these links. But yeah, of course, if you need any assistance, especially from a public user or private user perspective, myself and Charles are the main people supporting these users, but of course, the people on the call might support individual programs. So I thank you. I hope I have not spoken too long, and that you do have the picture. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, otherwise I cannot see what is happening. And see whether we should open the floor a bit. Are there any questions at this stage based on the slides? Any comments? Something that is not clear? You are most welcome to put up your hand or to start talking with them. Anybody there? Ronald.
Yes, geez, I was really trying to raise my hand. Thanks so much for the presentation and the overview. One of the things that I have seen in some of the things that we are doing, not only on some of these computational applications, is that on one side there is the industry that has needs, and on one side, there are people who are playing around with the the facilities, that you guys are having, we just write papers and we go about it. How much are you doing, you guys, in, putting up a platform, where you can be able to match, the needs that are there in industry and some of the expertise that fits, either at universities or at, places such as the CSI. So I'll give you an example. If there is,
I must say, I cannot hear you quite well.
Okay, that's really bad. Yeah, I hope this is much. All right, let me change my settings. I'll ask again in a few minutes.
Okay. I could not get all of that. I don't know whether maybe Charles, could you get it? I'm not so sure. I heard something about more the academic usage.
What I heard was that, and I think it's quite an interesting comment, is Ron's observation is that, as we know, they've got this predominant academic use and the small amount of industrial or commercial use. And his question was, what are we doing to kind of facilitate the exchange of expertise between these two sectors? In other words, for the commercial players to benefit in some way from some of the work that the academics are doing?
Ron, I think I got your indication. I think this is an interesting question. I think, Charles, if I just refer to our own discussion that we had the other day, I mean, the comparison of what happens in the commercial side of things and what happens in academia, there seems to be some gaps. So, of course, we would like to see ourselves, and we believe that we are providing opportunity for expertise at the academic level to grow. I mean, we have to say this in terms of just the sheer, say, number of hours and how programs are making use of the CHPC, that the expertise is grown at the universities. Whether the CHPC is necessarily, say, in person directly involved in every user, that probably not. I mean, that is where you also expect the university to do the training. But what we do see is that this connects between how commercial entities are using the CHPC and how students are using it. It just means that, not to say that if there are huge programs from the academia, that it will necessarily go into the commercial side of things. So Charles, I don't know whether you want to comment on your side. I know you think about these things a lot as well. Yes, so that is it's a really intriguing question. I think Ron's brought a new angle to this particular discussion. And it's quite a big topic. Why do we have this big difference between the two sectors? And then what are the mechanisms for bridging that? I think it's far too comprehensive to take on in a meeting like this, but I do think we need to put on our thinking caps maybe about how we can facilitate some of this. So yeah, Ron, I see your thumbs up, but maybe I don't think it's necessarily a satisfactory answer, but I think the actual answer is that, yes, there's more to be done here, and we might not have the most optimal solution yet. So, but thanks for raising that. Any other comments just about maybe, I don't know, general or even specific aspects of using or so, we probably will get to that in the open discussion as well. So this was just about setting the basis or providing the background. Okay, I don't see any more questions. I would assume it was then because it was such a clear presentation. I will make this available shortly in a link in the chat so that you can download it. So I think let's move on to the next part of our discussion. And of course, we would like every user of the CHPC to get the opportunity to tell us what they are doing. But in a limited time like this, we decided to invite 3 people. It doesn't mean if there's anybody on this call that really feels that you want to share with us and with the people on the call some of the work that you've been doing, especially the challenges or opportunities that you have experienced, you are most welcome to do it at any time, at the very least, in the open discussion. But to just give a bit of a perspective that is not only the CHPC talking, we want to give out an opportunity to 3 people to share some of their experiences. So Stephanie, I'm going to call you up, Stephanie Landman from the South African Weather Service, to just share a few comments and so on from it. I'm not sure, Stephanie, there's not a requirement for slides, but if you have a slide or 2, that's also fine. Stephanie, are you there?
Yeah, thank you, Vera. No, Charles made it quite known that slides are not welcome, so I don't have any slides. No, thank you, Vera and Charles, for this opportunity. I think just maybe for the 1 or 2 new colleagues in this meeting that hasn't been here before, I think most of us are so used to getting the weather on our phones and so forth that sometimes you forget that South Africa actually has a national weather service. So the South African Weather Service is a public entity. We fall under the Department of Fisheries, Forestries and the Environment. We became public in 2001. We are the authoritative voice for weather and climate forecasting in South Africa, which that means basically is even though you get your weather on your app or wherever you get it from, is that the South African Weather Service is the only organization or institute that is allowed to issue any weather warnings to the public. So if you see any weather warnings on your WhatsApp chat or anything, that's actually legal unless it comes with the Weather Service logo and from the Weather Service known sources of communication. We are part of the World Meteorological Organization, so we do comply with international meteorological standards. We're also designated by the state to provide weather services to the aviation, marine, and a range of other identified clients. In order for us to do this, though, apart from just the public weather service that we do, the information that you get from the radio, television, is that we do run numerical weather prediction models. Most of you are scientists. I think you know how numerical models work. So this is just the application of that kind of physical knowledge and governing equations to atmospheric processes. In order to run these, though, they are quite expensive and they are known to be one of the most complex systems and most expensive to run on any HPC system. We are dependent on global modeling systems. So we run a much higher limited area model over our Southern Africa domain because the Weather Service is a regional specialized center. So we do have obligations to our neighbors as well as the 16 countries within the SADC community. Then that model is run at a 4-kilometer resolution, meaning that every 4 kilometers we have a grid point that represent that space in time. Then we run a numerical model for South Africa. This is just the South African domain at a 1.5 kilometer. In other words, every 1.5 kilometer we simulate the atmospheric processes. We do this 4 times a day for all 4 of them, for all 2 configurations. In other words, we run 8 simulations a day. We also run an ensemble of these forecasts, meaning that instead of just having one answer or one forecast into the future, we can actually give you 18. So we can give you an indication of what's the probability or the likelihood or the known uncertainty for a specific event to occur. These events can be just general for public knowledge or public safety, but it can also be very specific to a user, for example, turbulence in aviation or ocean winds for marine forecasts. But for us to be able to do this work efficiently, we need to ensure that these numerical models are actually run on time when they are supposed to be running and are scheduled. As Werner said, we don't live in a perfect world. We all have Eskom, we all have aging systems. The Weather Service has its own HPC system. It's much, much smaller than the CHPC. I call it the desktop version of what they have, but it is still a very powerful system. It's coming up to 7 years now, but the CHPC is then our failover system for our HPC system, so that we can ensure that these numerical models are run when they should be running, and that the national weather forecasters, the guys that are on desk all across the country, we have 5 major regional offices. They have access to this data and they can issue warnings or related weather events as is needed. It has happened in the past where we had severe power failures or problems within our own building. We also moved offices in 2018. When we get a new system, they've assisted in the past where they run our systems for us operationally. The current status now is we have a memorandum of understanding with the CHP, with the CSIR, which then communicates back to the CHPC, where they are our official failover. So they are on standby to us 24/7. Meaning that if our system fails and we know we can't get this up within the next 2 to 3 hours, so we have a little bit of a leeway to try to fix things in-house, but if we see that's not going to happen, we can then automatically switch all our systems over to the CHPC. One of the questions Charles asked we should address is how easy it is and what is hard about it. So it was quite difficult to set up this failover system, not because of the CHPC, but because of the modeling system itself. But the CHPC rose to the challenge. They got the modeling system up and running, and that's been in place from, I forgot the date, I think from 2019. That's been in place, and we test it every 3 months. Every quarter, we test this failover system to ensure that it's in place. Because it's time constrained and time sensitive and in interest of national and public safety, we have a super express queue. Now, this is where most people might hate us, especially the academic community, is once we submit this run, if there are not enough resources available, it will kill off processes until there are not enough resources, and then it will submit our task and it will run. All of the tests that we've done in the past, it does happen within 5 to 7 minutes. So it is quite quick. And this really helps. The whole process has to do with downloading the data to drive this, the simulation or the NWP itself that runs on 1,728 cores. It's quite expensive. But then it also needs 2 to 3 additional cores to do the post-processing of this data. This runs then in parallel. The products are generated for the aviation, marine, and all the other necessary industries. Even the products that's needed for in-house display for accessibility to the forecasters, that's also generated on the CHPC side. And it just then gets pushed back to our systems in-house, whether that's at our head office or at our failover system at OR Tambo airport. What else do I want to say? Overall impression, I mean, there's just no way that we can ensure business continuity practices without the CHPC. The weather service cannot afford to have two systems. Global weather services like the National Weather Service in the US, or the Met Office in the UK, or the German Weather Service, they all have backup servers just dedicated to the National Weather Service for these modeling systems. We do not have the cost of it, and Treasury has also indicated before that it's not necessary because we do have the CHPC as part of the government expenditure. Just going forward, we will continue making use of the CHPC. Like I said, we don't see that changing anytime soon. Our aging system, as I said, it's coming up to 7 years. We are in the processes of acquiring a new system. We are in the final stretches of this. Hopefully, we will get our new system at the end of 2022, and then we will definitely knock on the door of the CHPC to run our system operationally in parallel while we are installing our new system for some period. We will determine that period once we get there. During the acquisition of our new system, the CHPC was also, they also assisted us when we had to specify the technical requirements for the tender process and the tender documentation. So it's not just the operations and the failover, it's also really a collaboration between two organizations that are heavily involved with CHPC and computing costs. So they've used us in the past. They've assisted us in the past with our previous acquisition. They've assisted us again, and hopefully they'll be there for us going into the future for our installation at the end of the year, hopefully, and also for all future backup systems and failovers that's necessary. And I was also just requested from within the weather service just to note that yes, we are a public entity doing operational work for public service, but we are also recognized by the National Research Foundation as a research institute. So some of those hours that Werner did indicate, some of those hours are for research purposes. We are continuously testing and researching our NWP systems itself. We are testing new NWP systems. So not just for operations and production, we also make use of the CHPC for research and development and innovation processes as well. I think that's what I have to add now. Nothing more than I can say. Thanks, Werner. I think that's it from the weather service.
Thank you, Stefania, and I trust people on the call will appreciate the, let's call it a unique way of supporting SOURCE, the weather service, but it's not necessarily that unique. Also, it is the task of CHPC to provision and to support the public sector, and the South African Weather Service is just a good example of how this is being done. I just want to also just comment on that, comment about the Super Express queue. Although that is there to be used, I can also just mention it has not been used. It has not been needed to be used yet. This is not something that will regularly be used. Some things have to go really wrong at South African Weather Service before that is being used. It is the reason why we call it a failover. There must be the real failures at South African Weather Service for them to use it. But we are proud to offer that service, and I think that in itself is a message also to the public sector. The CHPC and MIKIS is there to support the public sector, and if there are some specific needs other than just simply doing your research, that we are there and we can discuss and put in place what is necessary. And yes, when we show the hours on the CHPC system, Stefani is correct. I mean, the hours is for research programs. We've got more than one research program from the South African Weather Service. I think there's 3 or 4 with their own PIs, and they are actively using it for research purposes. And I think Stefani mentioned this, and this is where the South African Weather Service's resources are falling short. They simply do not have enough resources to designate to research. I mean, it's all about operational support from their own systems. So yeah, I hope that's, yeah, Stephanie, you're welcome.
Yes. Yeah, I can just add that our in-house HPC, just to confirm what Warren just said, our own in-house HPC runs 24 hours at 80% capacity. We can't push it more than 80% because then the whole system slows down, and we are a time-sensitive organization. We don't want things to slow down. So it does run 24 hours a day at really high capacity. So we can't really ingest any research in between. That just messes up the whole process flow within the organization itself. Oh, while I'm speaking, I just saw that Quinn has a question in the chat box. Quinn, yes.
Sorry, Quinn, for ignoring you like that. I think, Charles, you wanted to, but Quinn, you can rather speak. I've not seen the chat, but you can speak.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so thanks very much, Stephanie. It's always interesting to hear from the Weather Service. I think you guys are doing amazing work. But yeah, the question that I posted was just about, you mentioned that you do about 18 odd simulations when you do each ensemble prediction. And I was just wondering whether that's limited at the moment by the performance of the HPC resources that you've got, or are there other reasons that you stick to 18? I mean, are there just not any statistical benefits for going any further?
Yeah, so it's both. So the one limitation, why it's just 18 members, is a scientific reason. So it has to do with the spread of the atmospheric phenomenon. So you do want enough information to indicate the unknown or the uncertainty of the forecast, but you don't want too many because then it becomes noisy, as you know, that the atmosphere is really a chaotic system. So the further you go into the future, the more chaotic it becomes. And so in other words, the more members you will have, just the more noise you will ingest, and the signal will get lost, and it really becomes unusable. So 18 is that really, it's that Goldilocks zone. So it gives you enough uncertainty and spread in the forecast. What's limiting us with the ensemble is not the members itself. What's limiting us is the number of times a day we can run it. Currently, we're just running it twice a day because, like I said, it is expensive. The other thing, the CHPC or the HPC, it's limiting us in terms of the domain that we can cover. Ideally, we would like to run this ensemble over the whole SADC region. Currently, we're just running it over South Africa. The other limitation is then also how far we can go. So we're just doing it for T+60, in other words, about 2.5 days, just under 3 days into the future. Whereas if we have more computing resources, we might push it to 3 days. So there are computing limitations, but some of the limitations has to do with the science itself, and just it's not necessary. You can go higher resolution, you can go more members, but it's scientifically, you don't get any benefits. It's just too costly for no new benefit at all.
Right, okay, no, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. So I think this also represents an open invitation. If there's any of the other public institutions, I know ARC is on the call, even you, Quinn, from the Mintech side, where you say you're doing more, say, public focused work. If you want to add to this discussion, you are most welcome, or you can keep comments to the open discussion later on. I think, Stephanie, your presentation just sets a scene for, I would say, like I said, typical public sector support for SOAR. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so what I'm going to ask is, we are going for about 1.5 hours now. I think we're just going to take a quick break, just to grab a cup of tea or so. I trust that is okay with all. We're just going to leave the call open before we get to our next two speakers from eScience and Greenpan. I trust that is okay. So we're at 11:34 at the moment. So let's just take a quick break and we join again 11:45, if that is okay. Maybe you would just like to grab that quick refreshment. So thank you very much. Let's just pause it there and we will continue in 10 minutes time. Thank you. Okay, I think we can resume. I hope everybody is still there. I see we've not lost participants, at least from the count on Zoom. So thank you very much for staying online. I hope you all got the refreshment. Typically at physical events, we would have had some other refreshments as well, but unfortunately we will have to do with what we have on our own sites, I suppose. So yeah, let's move on. I think keeping with the user presentations, I just want to make a comment before Zahid and Sevis comes online. And this is about, we at CHPC, of course, do not distinguish between amongst entities to who we would like to provide a service. I mean, everybody at any institution is welcome to come to get access to this national facility. When it comes to private sector entities, of course, we do have big multinational companies making use of this. Of course, the example is Johnson Matthey and Hatch and so on have been long-term. De Beers Marine, they are long-term users of the CHPC, and typically those entities does have access to other resources as well. So CHPC is maybe just one of the resources that they use. And what we've seen now, for example, with Johnson Matthey, is that they have decided to stop using the CHPC. I mean, they've been using the CHPC probably for almost about the last 10 years, and they've decided now to stop using, just not because they are unhappy about CHPC service, but only because of policy changes on where they want to submit their calculations going forward, and they're going to seem to be centralizing it all onto their internal resources. But I think that just shows an example of how flexible, I suppose, and the options to bigger entities. But when it comes to the service provisioning from CHPC and also from the DSI, to be able to provide our service to small and medium and micro enterprises is something that the DSI really is emphasizing. This is providing a service or access to resources at a cost-effective level to entities that really do not have any other option. I mean, if you are a small entity, you simply do not have the option necessarily to buy or spend capital on compute infrastructure, and you certainly almost certainly will not have on-site support for system administrators and things like that to support yourself. And that is why we are really would like to expand our provisioning of service to the SMMEs. And I think eScience and Greenplan that's coming up is good examples of smaller entities that I think is benefiting from the CHPC, and that's why we'd also like to give them a bit of a chance to tell you what their experiences are. So Zahid, I'm going to hand over to you first. Thank you very much. I appreciate your willingness to share at this forum. I trust you are ready to discuss.
Thank you for the opportunity to allow us to share. Good morning, everyone. My name is Zaid Ibrahim. Air Quality Officer representing eScience Associates and the commercial or private sector. We mainly use the CHPC resources for atmospheric modeling over Africa, with focus over atmospheric modeling within the Southern African region, including Namibia and Botswana. Initially, eScience approached CHPC to assist with the research project on behalf of the Water Research Council. The aim of this project was to forecast atmospheric chemical dispersion and deposition. This was conducted using the WRF-CHEM model to model 10 years of acid deposition over the South African high-veld region within the high-veld priority area. This was the first instance of WRF-CHEM being run in South Africa, particularly due to the lack of HPC's resources in the past. CHPC coming online with HPC resources allowed us to access and also set up the model for this project to be undertaken. The main reasons why we chose to use CHPC. Firstly, processing power and storage capacity. eScience's in-house servers, we have HP ProLiant machines, which have a total of 48 cores, as compared to CHPC's almost 33,000 cores. So to run the CHEM project would have taken 1 day to run the equivalent of the modeling period. Essentially 1 day in real time would have produced 1 day of model data. Therefore, in order for our in-house servers to run 10 years of model data, it would have taken us approximately 10 years to get the project done. After many hours of research and struggles of getting output from WRF-Chem with the assistance of Charles and the CHPC team, CHPC Systems gave us the ability to run 1 year equivalent in 1 day. So we managed to run 10 years of model data to be completed within 10 days real time. This is due to availability of more processing cores and the ability to run multiple modes in parallel. So we could run, we ran WRF-Chem on a monthly basis, but we could run 12 months at a time rather than running 1 month at a time and waiting for that to finish before the next month comes up. Secondly was cost. Cost-wise, using CHPC to run private projects is considerably cheaper than that of other HPC entities such as Amazon AWS, who have the WRF model suite installed. However, we have to pay a little bit extra in order to use that service also. The other entity is Google. Google do not have the system installed, and we would have to install it on their system for them. Following from the CHEM project, due to the capabilities and success of the CHEM modeling, we could expand this project into a 50-year modeling period to investigate the long-term impacts of acid deposition on the Vaal catchment. These research projects have since been wrapped up, and currently CHPC assists eScience with weather forecast modeling, in which wind and solar data is modeled over large regions of the country to determine and assess suitable locations for the establishment of renewable energy farms, such as wind energy farms and solar farms, mainly South Africa, Namibia, and Kenya. Currently, eScience uses the resources to assist with the running mesoscale meteorological models on a 4-kilometer resolution, to which we hope to expand in the future to a higher resolution, about 500 meters or maybe 300, to allow us, and this allows us to speed up the project delivery. We do this in the instance, we run the Weather Research and Forecast Model, or WRF. We use the CHPC as it allows us to speed up project delivery timeframes and overcome capacity limitations in-house. Project speed up is possible due to the ability to set up the multiple models to run in parallel on the CHPC, and also the higher processing speeds, larger storage capacity. This is all beneficial to us. As in-house, we don't have the capabilities as HPC or CHPC. The difficulties we encounter include connection stability when downloading output data of CHPC. However, this has stabilized over the last few months, which allows for better data management on the system. So we don't have our data sitting on CHPC's storage devices for too many months. Other difficulties include downloading raw data directly from web datasets. This is not only due to CHPC systems, but also the web data centers. Accessing them directly from some networks is just, and some operating systems is just problematic. So we generally have to download the data on one operating system and then transfer it from our operating system onto the CHPC systems. However, we will contact Charles and the team in the future to assist. Maybe there is a better way to get around this issue. Our overall experience, we are impressed with the CHPC services and capabilities, both of the equipment and the team, and we look forward to their continued support and assistance. I'd like to take this time to thank Charles and the team at CHPC for always being on hand to assist with issues, both big and small, and to thank Werner for continuously providing status updates, such as the effects of our load shedding.
Thank you very much, Zaid, for that brief overview. CHPC is, of course, looking forward to keep on supporting eScience. I can just mention to the colleagues that eScience has been using the CHPC for a number of years and significant hours at it as well. So yeah, we are pleased to be able to do that. Yeah, maybe just in terms of your message, me sending messages, I know the moment anyone sees my name in an email, you know it's bad news. So hopefully that will be limited soon. Quinn, you have a hand up. Please proceed.
Yeah, thanks, Werner. Thanks, Zaid. Very, very interesting work that you guys are doing. I know we're doing quite a lot of work also looking at sort of positioning of solar resources and things like that. Do you do anything where you're coupling the basically the weather scale models with things like dust pickup and dispersion? You know, I'm thinking particularly in terms of soiling, which is quite a big issue for solar plants. That's something we've had a lot of trouble finding data for.
At the moment, we haven't looked into that, mainly because the resolution is about 4 kilometers. So it's a bit more difficult to determine the dust dispersion with the current models that we have. Currently, our models use about a 300 meter grid scale. So to get from the 4 kilometer to 300 meter is much more difficult. So mainly we're looking at the solar radiation, so we look at the solar radiation, the cost angle. We're just looking for
so it's the
mainly sites.
Main resource.
Yeah, the main resources over a large scale as to which sites would be particularly good, and then we'll do an in-house modeling on a higher resolution to determine the other factors.
Right. Okay. Oh, thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Quinn and Zaid. I'm not sure whether there's any more questions. Stephanie, I see your hand is up, please.
No, sorry, this might be inappropriate. I just want to say to Quinn that the Weather Service do these kind of site evaluations and site auditing as well. So, I mean, if it's really something you are interested in, if eScience can't help, it might be worthwhile contacting us and see if we can assist you.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'll definitely pass your contacts on to the guys that are doing this work.
Thank you, Stephanie and Quinn. If there's not any more questions, let's move on to the third and last presentation that we now formally asked. But I mean, of course, if anybody else wants to still present, they are also fine to do so. So Sevis from Sale is from Greenplan. And I think, Sevis, I've not worked with you directly so much, but of course with Kenny Allen from Greenplan has been a long-time user of CHPC. And Greenplan, I think, is a typical example of a smaller entity that uses resources whenever the projects come in. And I know there's some interesting projects about fire simulations and so on that's been done. So I hope you will give us a bit more background. So thanks, Sevis. Over to you.
Thank you, Werner. I appreciate it. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, so you are clear.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you for the opportunity just to give a little bit of our experience of the CHPC. I thought maybe just a bit of a background. We're coming more from the built environment sector. And from that regards, we look at kind of, depending on when the projects come in, we look at all kinds of facets such as fire and smoke, especially more focusing on the smoke extractions for buildings. We've helped out with data centers to determine if they're getting sufficient cooling throughout all the necessary data racks and if they've got an optimal solution. We also assist various mechanical engineers when they're doing plant designs, especially when you don't want to have sort of heat recirculating within your plant and you want to try to get the optimum cooling throughout the processes. So obviously when you're doing these kinds of study, the wind plays a factor, and that becomes sort of our fourth leg that we stand on when it comes to our CFD simulations, which include simulating wind, which again, if you're looking at a proper study, it could be anything from 16 to 32 scenarios that need to be assessed. And depending on the environment in which we're working with, it could be very large domains. Although GreenPlan does have facilities in-house to run smaller scale CFD simulations and do studies in-house, we do find that when we start hitting the mark of about 40 to 60 million and plus cells, domains that we need to look at, then we sort of start to lean on to the CHPC for some assistance in terms of resources and compute capabilities. So depending on the projects we're looking at, I mean, we could focus on various situations. It could be steady state or transient, depending on what the client requires or what it is we're interested in. And in that terms, I mean, setting up, from our experience working with the CHPC, setting up a case in-house is pretty simple to do. And then we usually prefer software such as FileZilla, so forth, to transfer the data to the CHPC, which is usually a couple of hundred megs and takes a few seconds. Setting up cases on the CHPC has been quite a breeze. I think we had one hiccup once where a submit file got exposed to a Windows environment, and that actually changed the line feed character, which meant that the Q sub fell over. But once we figured out that that's what happened, we managed to convert it back to a more Linux compatible format, and everything ran like a dream. Some of the limitations we run into sometimes in terms of using the CHPC is non-disclosure agreements with clients. This is kind of a hiccup. Sometimes they basically say any work or research we do is not allowed to leave our person, which unfortunately means even transferring to the CHPC. Although as far as we believe, it should be relatively private and secure. Certain clients just don't prefer it. That's one of the limiting factors we run into from that point of view. The other limiting issue is what Werner and a couple of the others have touched on before, is that there is the current national issue with Eskom deciding to stop work for everyone, give us a break every now and then. But here we've actually had quite a pleasant experience with the CHPC staff. And the fact that, like Werner was mentioning, and Zayed was also mentioning earlier, that the communications that are going out very quickly after a fallover, what we really appreciate is the detail of the information that is provided. We're not just being told, listen, the CHPC is unavailable right now. We're being told that it's been failover. This is why, this is estimated times of getting back online and so forth. And when these have happened during our projects, we've actually been very happy to see that within about 24 hours, there is some kind of capability back online, and within about 48-hour period, even at half capacity, the CHPC is able to support our work and get us back up and simulating so that we can complete our projects within the timeframes that we've scheduled. In general, our experience with the CHPC has been very reliable. The staff is very professional and helpful. What we do find quite useful is the wiki pages that they keep up to date. This obviously helps us whenever we have to do some troubleshooting or are looking into maybe expanding into new facilities or new tools. And I've mostly been in contact with Andrew Gill, who I believe has left the CHPC at the moment, but he's kind of been our contact when it comes to sussing out any potential work that we could be pushing away and so forth. Overall, we've had a very pleasant experience. The systems that they do deploy, the QBS, I think, systems works beautifully and seamlessly. We haven't had any issues managing our jobs. Being able to track your jobs has also been quite useful to know whenever one of them is stalled. We did find, though, that sometimes certain jobs actually run faster when you're using less resources. So in other words, less cores or less nodes. We suspect this might have to do with the InfiniBand link that might be causing some slowdowns in some of the simulations. But besides that, it's been running pretty smoothly. And yes, it saves us weeks of work or weeks of time of waiting for simulations to run, as we can run a lot of these in parallel, etc. From our side, we obviously would like to thank the staff at the CHPC and obviously Nikki's DSI and CSIR for making these resources available to the private sector. And looking very much forward to using the new file system and the 4 petaflop cluster, which should be coming up soon. Thank you very much. And I think that's it from our side.
Thank you very much, Sivis. I appreciate you touching on a number of practical things. So if there's any newer people on the call, I suppose you will get those pointers. I feel like, thank you for pointing out the wiki. I think the wiki is a is a place where we really try to keep things updated for all users. And that should be the first place to go for anybody that's looking for practical information about how to access the system. But yeah, I'm very pleased overall, Sivas, that CHPC can support green planning this way. I think this is ideally what we want to do, and to be able to report back is to our funder is also a privilege for us. Yes, Quinn, I see your hand.
Yeah, sorry, it's me again. Thanks,
No
Sivas.
problem.
That's really interesting to hear some of your experiences. In particular, yeah, you struck a note with the whole NDA story. I think we're literally actually going through a process with one of our clients at the moment on exactly this sort of. They're very, very, very protective of their IP. They don't want their data the premises of Mintech or anything like that. And it's not really a question to you, but maybe just a general one for discussion. Could we look at things like cloud infrastructure to facilitate this kind of thing, where almost we can make the data accessible, across to CHPC, but in a very controlled, maintained, secured environment?
Yeah, I think this is always a question and a topic that we need to address, especially when it comes to private sector commercial work. But of course, for any user, I think securing data, or at least making sure your data does not fall into the hands of people that should not see it, is an important thing. I think for the CHPC, it's all about a balance on how we provision our service. So we do not have functionality where we encrypt data, or so we rely on basic Linux securities. And of course, no other user can see your data. I mean, this is a core principle, but it doesn't mean that nobody at CHPC can see the data. I mean, of course, we do have system administrators and so on that needs to operate and need to access, or be able to access these but not look at the data, but potentially can see it. So, but we understand from a commercial perspective that this needs to be addressed, or at least considered. And in the past, we have missed out on opportunities actually to support certain sectors due to this. Charles, I don't know, Charles, whether you have more comments on this. We do not have specific plans to make it more secure. That is, I can confirm, but we're always willing to talk to users to see, well, what the real problem is and whether what we are provisioning is not sufficient. Charles, do you want to comment on that before we go to Aaron's? I see his hand is up.
Yeah, I think I should. Well, first of all, yes, this has been a big issue, and if you think you've got a problem, you should try working with the defense industry, which is far worse.
I can imagine.
What you and I probably both know from our experience is anybody who manages to steal a CFD data file is going to be tied up for the next 6 months trying to figure out what on earth you were doing. It's a very good way of it's a very good way of throwing people off track. And there are things that you can do to make it even more difficult for them. In other words,
it has a lot of natural built-in encryption. Yes.
Yes, and you can make that a bit smarter, even with what you call your file names. I've always made all my file names extremely descriptive for my own benefit. But if you're trying to hide it from people, you can either say run 1, run 2, run 3, or whatever, or you can even make it misleading, which is exactly the kind of thing that's going to tie somebody up for months trying to figure out, instead of being able to spy on your information. However, this is not an argument we've had any success getting across to the people who actually take responsibility for security.
Yeah. And I think that's a very good point, Charles, is that you and I know exactly the fact that the risk of this ever falling into anybody's hands, if you take a few basic steps like that, is absolutely zero. I mean, it's there's no way that anybody's going to invest that kind of time and effort. But the sort of legal people that run these big companies think in strange, twisty ways, and yeah, they often don't take those kind of arguments as proof that it's sufficiently secure. So it's more a legal and administrative problem than a real actual issue of security.
It's also a question of responsibility. Somebody has to basically put up their hand and say they take responsibility for the security of data, and we can understand that. So this is an important thing. An interesting concept that came across in some of the dealings we had with the Americans on, let's call it, commercial or industrial simulation work is they like to use for commercial work the term pre-competitive research. So when you're working with pre-competitive research, IP is not on the table yet. And then those are your sort of very fertile markets for dealing with HPC simulation. Once you get into data security, it's so difficult to give people guarantees. And you've seen the statistics, 99% of the capacity of the system is being used for research, which is by definition publicly funded and open. So we cannot really make an argument about making it much more difficult for the other 99% of people to use the system. So there are answers to some of these things. File encryption, for example, is one, but the problem with file encryption is it still has to be decrypted before it is run. And you've always got the problem that you've got the potential of bribing or blackmailing a system administrator, which is, one of your weaknesses in any kind of shared system.
And there's always a way in if you're going to find one. And I think somebody who's really dedicated at coming to find your data is going to find it no matter what the barriers you already put in place. There's no perfectly secure system. And I think it's, as I said, really the issue is really what we're seeing is not actually it's not the security itself. It's the perception of the security and how that's seen by some of these bigger organizations. I think they attach inordinately or disproportionate value to their data, where it often actually doesn't have quite that much value. But inside the organization, it's absolutely de rigueur to never ever let this stuff out of your sight.
Indeed, but of course we're open to other suggestions. I'm very intrigued to hear what Ernst has to say.
Yes, please, Ernst. You've been waiting patiently. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Werner. I think a comment from something that we've seen on the Altair side is where security gets really important is if you work in Europe and you're working with patient-specific medical data. I mean, GDPR will skin you alive if that gets out. So a solution that we've sort of started working with is Azure Stack Hub, which more or less guarantees the user that that data will not even leave your country. So if you have rules and regulation in place that says no data may sit on a server that is hosted in the US or somewhere where some legal entity could get their hands on it, this kind of solution covers that for you. So you can, number one, guarantee data is not going outside. And number two, it looks like the Azure stack. So if you trust the Azure security procedures, if you trust Microsoft in that regard, then that comes along for the ride. And this seems to satisfy many of the requirements in this medical research field. So might be something we can look into for people that are curious about how that would work.
Yeah, thanks, Vince. That's actually really interesting. Yeah, because I think it's as I mentioned before, it's the perception of security rather than the actual security. And particularly these bigger organizations will trust you if you say, hey, it's a Microsoft product and it's Azure and it's all secure. Whereas if you just tell them that you're implementing your own security by renaming file names, which is arguably probably better, they'll totally disbelieve you. So that's actually quite an interesting angle. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks, Ernst. But Zahid, I would like to come back to you. Of course, what you mentioned about, say, an entity like yourself potentially missing out on a client if the work needs to be done at CHPC, but we are just not ticking the box in terms of security. The reality for you is then you might miss out on that work, and we can be clever about how to make it more secure in practice. But if the guarantees are not in place, it is a problem. So yeah, we don't have I think a solution straight off the bat. But if you do run into these things, please take up the discussion that we can see what we can do. So I just want to close that loop. Of course, Ernst, you're bringing up a very important topic about the personal information of people. And I think that is, even more pronounced, of course, now with the POPI Act live in South Africa. But yeah, I think from a commercial user perspective, it's more about protecting IP. That is the real question.
That's correct, Werner. Thank you very much.
So let's move on. I don't know if there's any more questions. You are welcome. But I'm also looking in terms of time. In the beginning, I said we don't have to spend all the time, but we are heading that way. But I enjoy the discussion. I trust that people are benefiting from this. So Charles, I think let's move on. The next topic is very much focused on the private sector and the survey that was run. And I think almost every private sector entity on this call have participated in this survey. And I think we just felt it appropriate. I mean, this was done in December, and it felt appropriate at this forum to give feedback. I think people participating in surveys and never seeing a feedback is also not fair to the people that participated. So Charles, please take them through this survey, and I trust it will be interesting to everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Werner. Let me just get myself organized here. Right. The survey of the commercial users was commissioned late last year. We haven't done anything like this, at least not in a very long time. So there's a lot that we don't understand about what our commercial users have been doing. So the objective here was to, first of all, to understand what our users are doing and what they need, to try and get some kind of handle on their most important concerns and worries. Basically take stock of how far we've come and how it's going in that respect. What can we change to make things work better in future that are within our abilities to change? And then the last point, and it's actually quite important, all of this is only possible because the government department is putting the money into the facility and the people to allow us to do this. So it is quite important for them to be informed about what's being done with their resources. So, you know, I'd like to make a joke about keeping the funding agency happy, but it is actually extremely important for Happy to be doing that for us. So it is important to get this information, to get it out to the funding agency to know that the money is being well spent. So I've taken my kind of approach to a survey. In other words, I don't like to comply with acronyms and things. What I wanted to do was to ask questions and try to interpret what people are saying. So we asked our 21 principal investigators 9 questions. Which sector are you operational in? What kind of work are you doing? How are you doing it? What kind of methods are you using for that? How useful has it been to your business? And then we want to understand why you're not using any more. What's constraining you from making better use of the facility? Do you intend to continue using it in future? And has it generally been a satisfactory experience? And what do you need from us in future? And then we'd like some nice colorful CFD pictures, which you've already just seen. So we asked these questions of 21 commercial PIs, and to our happy surprise, 100% of those responded, and we're very grateful for that. This is a very sort of approximate breakdown of the sectors that people are operational in. And of course, some of these companies are working in more than one sector, so there must, by definition, be a fair amount of overlap. But mining features quite prominently. There's 1, 4, 6, 7 of these organizations involved in some way in mining. There's a single one involved in specialty chemicals, which is Johnson Matthey, which we'll talk about in a bit then. There's agriculture, the agricultural research involved in bioinformatics then. And then quite a bit of engineering, contract research, and water features quite strongly there. Then again, there's also cooling and process simulation, which I think you could say is probably very closely related to the other engineering consulting. The energy sector, 2 in nuclear, others in other energy sectors, and then 2 from the aerospace and defense field. So we do have to ask ourselves a little bit why we end up with this particular division, and it's got a lot to do, I think, with having people inside the CFD, inside the CHPC, very familiar with CFD, in the form of myself and Andrew, my former colleague. But then again, making extensive use to get real things done, extensive use of computing to get real things done is a bit of a CFD specialty. CFD was one of the first fields to really develop that, so that it's not unsurprising that 17 of the programs used CFD. Chemical reactions was just a single one, all the others were just single ones. And I've put the MinTech work under computational mechanics, knowing full well that it's probably at least half CFD anyway. So it's kind of dominated by CFD, but the picture looks rather different, as Werner also showed with his illustration of usage. When you look at the use of hours, it's dominated by the chemical reactions, and then only second is CFD. And then this shows to what extent the total commercial usage is dominated by a single user using more than 50% of the resources. Numbers differ a little bit here from what you saw earlier on, because these numbers were only valid up to December. Right, to get onto the questions themselves, usefulness. So it's not exactly a surprise that everybody that we polled who've been active in on the CHPC for a while said that it was useful, because they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't find it useful. But it's still valuable to take a look at how people are responding. So generally speaking, people have been quite happy. Extremely useful, very useful, essential, made a project feasible, could only do that using HPC, speeds up delivery time. It's been our experience that once you get an engineer using high performance computing, there's a bit of an initial obstacle to actually getting the data off-site and perhaps learning how to use a remote Linux system. But once you get people into that kind of way of thinking, the advantages are so compelling, because your speed ups are so great that you actually never really want to go back to doing desktop work if you can possibly avoid it. So generally speaking, the usefulness question actually produced that kind of answer that you would expect for the people that have already been converted to the style of thinking. But we are really interested in finding the answer to this question, which is what's preventing you from making use of it? If it's useful, and you've just said it's useful, why are you using so little of it? That's got something to do, I think, with people's definition of what is little and much. So what we regard as little is quite a lot, I think, by the standards of most of the commercial users who are familiar really with working with on-site resources. So responses we got somewhat varied. Quite a few said we also have other resources. Just heard from both Zaid and Sevis that they had some resources in-house. The SAWS, of course, has got very large resources in-house. So yes, some people have their own resources. Some said we simply don't need any more. We just don't need to go into this in greater depth than we are already. The cost of software has turned out to be quite a significant limitation. I know some of our users are using open source software for commercial work. In general, when you're dealing with real world deadlines and things, cost wins against, or money wins against time every time. Therefore, you would tend to work with commercial software, but it costs money. Even the high performance computing friendly software licensing model used with SAR CCM Plus, where you don't pay per core, but just per wall clock time, even that adds up if you use a lot of it. So certainly cost of software is a constraint. And when I was working independently as a contractor several years ago, definitely a great limitation. Handing over half the income of a project to the software company rather hurts. So it's something that's difficult to overcome, because there are also limitations to the open source. Generally speaking, if your projects are valuable enough, of course, this is not so much of a constraint. Tight deadlines, do you actually have the time to spend on getting all this work done? This rather reflects a kind of a reality where a lot of the simulation work is perhaps not seen as a luxury, but it's somewhat expendable in the sense that you may not go into full depth into it, and you've only got so much time to get the work done. In other words, you finish the work when the time runs out, not when the work is finished. Lack of projects or funding. So it certainly comes across that our clients do not have a flood of projects to work on. You need dedicated staff to do commercial simulation work. So a couple of our users have said that they just don't have enough staff to actually do this work. And then in bigger companies, I think we're all familiar with this, there is a poor understanding of the value of simulation. When you get asked how much is this going to save us if we spend all this money on simulation, it's very, very difficult to come up with an answer which is not at least somewhat contrived. So it's quite a difficult sales job within an organization to sell the value of very intensive simulation. Some organizations have made that transition, and that's where you see the kind of results with Johnson Matthey. But A lot of others, you have difficulty selling that idea. We've talked about this before. Industry and academia, we're not even talking about not being on the same planet. They're in different universes. Academic users, user groups are large. They're racking up millions of compute hours. Our commercial users are racking up thousands of compute hours. The difference in scale is profound. So you have to ask yourself, what is going on here? Are these people graduating from university and then no longer being involved in simulation work? And I think that is very much the case. You've got to ask yourself, what are these companies then doing, and what is the academic system doing if it's qualifying all these people with abilities that they're never applying in practice? So of course, a certain element, to a certain extent, you'd expect this kind of trend because it's, let's call it, cheaper and more feasible to do simulation work in academia than it is to do lots of experimental work. But I'm still very intrigued to find out how this compares to other countries. My hunch is that we've got a problem, and a very, very serious problem at that. So the question on, will you continue using the CHPC? Everybody said yes, except Johnson Matthey, which is a big blow to us because they were by far the biggest user, but they have closed down modeling activities in South Africa for a number of reasons, which not all of which they shared with us, but things like problems of dealing with security and reliability of electricity supply feature quite strongly there. So it's a big warning to the country, but there's very little that we can do about that. Others will generally continue, provided that the appropriate projects come in. But when you read what people write about their prospects for the next 12 months or so, you come under the very firm impression of how precarious business is for most of the organizations, especially SMEs. You don't really have a lot of medium to long-term certainty to plan on, and that rather means that you cannot really commit to making use of a lot of computing facilities in future. So we've already had the response that more or less everybody said that it was a very useful experience for them. But I still think it's worth asking the question, how satisfactory has it been? Because it's quite possible to have an experience which is useful, but not entirely satisfactory. I think you can go to the bank if you want an example of that, for us. So we got a very mixed bag of responses here, and most of it was very, very positive. Yes, great support, satisfactory, stable and consistent, exemplary support, appreciate the amazing support. Makes us all feel good to hear responses like that, of course. But we know that we've actually had a fairly poor year. For the first time since the commissioning of Lengau, we've run into serious storage problems. The hoped for improved reliability when we commissioned the Luster 3P storage didn't happen. It made things worse, and that was an unexpected nasty surprise. And then we've all been hit by load shedding, of course. And to top that all off, we also went through an episode with the existing Luster that we lost data, which is something that we really don't want to do. Although we don't guarantee Luster data, we certainly don't want to lose it. So yes, we are aware that we had problems, and I was quite surprised to really only get a single strong response. And it's a bit disappointing that the person who made this response is not in this meeting, but we do take his comment seriously. Basically, his comment is, when the CHPC works, it works well. The cost to use the resource is unparalleled, very low. Trouble is, it's almost irrelevant because of the reliability, and they have to ensure that they have a backup plan using other resources. He's been critical of basically CHPC not applying strict policies to manage the load on Luster, which we take on the chin because we know that, but there are historical reasons why we've ended up in that particular position. Some scheduling issues, connectivity issues, like the network problems we had over December. So we had problems, and we're aware of this. So we know about this. We own these problems. We're working on them. But as you all know, we've got the same technical and non-technical constraints that all of you have. Right, what do you actually need? So let's go through this point by point, because this is what's important for us. Thank you very much. Several said they don't need anything else. They're very happy with what we're getting, and that's very satisfying for us. Next one was a stable Lustre storage system, and certainly we can agree with that. Very difficult to work without it. The good news is that even without the troublesome Lustre 3P, being very aggressive in managing the occupation of the older Lustre system, we've got back to a stable and reliable system, which is performing very well at the moment. We've had no problems for several months now. And we do hope to get Lustre 3P back online in the near future. So there's hope for that one. Improved upload performance. Well, except for the network glitches we've had once or twice, for the most part, this is not our fault. At our end, we have a 10 gigabits per second link available. If you've got big data files to upload, you can use Globus. Globus looks a bit strange to start using when you first get introduced to it, but actually we find people come right with Globus quite easily. And once you start using it, it makes a tremendous amount of sense to do your big files this way, because it's fire and forget. And it gets you very high transfer rates. You can also do SCP, secure copy, upload directly to the same node that Globus runs on, the DTN node. And that also gets you very good data rates. So we do have the performance at our end. So generally speaking, if you've got a problem here, and this is a general message, ask. We might be able to give you a good answer, like do your uploading to DTN or use Globus. Then the better UPS, the uninterruptible power supply. Fortunately, as Werner has mentioned, we should be out of that particular problem by the end of July with the new infrastructure. But do spare a thought for our neighbors, because we are making a lot of noise and producing a lot of diesel fumes. There's no way of getting around it. Eskom's problems making things very, very difficult for everybody in the country at every conceivable level. It's a real limitation. And running diesel generators for several hours a day is a huge financial and environmental and other costs involved with doing that. But we should be able to keep the cluster going. Shorter queues, well, the express queue, if you're not already on express queue, ask for it, we'll arrange it for you. That'll help. And then if we can keep all of the cluster running through load shedding, that will help tremendously to manage the queue difficulties with jobs queuing too long. Better reliability, we certainly agree with that. There are many facets to that. We've had a bad year for the reasons that we've already described here. We do have to bear in mind that the cluster is aging. The good news is funds are available and plans are in place to replace the Lengau cluster. It's not going to happen that fast. Procurement is a cumbersome process at the best of times, but then we've also got all sorts of worldwide supply chain problems that are very well documented in the media. Please bear with us, in other words. More open source packages. Once again, asking you shall receive. We do a lot of work in installing open source packages for people. You do run occasionally into an open source package that becomes a nightmare to install. But for the most part, we've learned to do this fairly efficiently. And if we don't have the one you need, ask, and we will do our very best to get it working for you. Here's one that I'm less sympathetic to, which is the question asking for a user-friendlier interface. The problem with this is that most of our users of HPC facilities are power users. And power users using lots of resources don't benefit from a user-friendly interface. User-friendly interfaces is basically mostly of benefit to beginners. And to make them really reliable, and they need to be 100% reliable to be worth using and not more of a frustration, is an enormous amount of work which comes at expensive resources that could be used elsewhere. So there's only one request for that, and my answer to that is probably better just to spend a little bit more time talking to us. We can find ways for you to get your things done. And that relates to training. It doesn't make a lot of sense to offer formal training to commercial users because people have different requirements and they come on board at different times. But we are there to help you. So it's no problem sitting down and doing some shared screen work to get people up and running. So just ask and we'll help you with that. So basically, to summarize, people want better reliability, and I can only agree with that. We want it too. So where do we go from here in terms of recommendations? Yeah, we've talked enough about UPS. I'm not going to carry on with that. And I think we all hate ESCOM at a very deep level, and that will continue for some time. Better storage reliability is essential. Well, I think Werner has touched upon that. With multiple levels of storage will be coming online in the near future. Same thing goes for better data backup and archiving. So the good news is this is in the works. Then a recommendation that doesn't actually come from the survey, but it comes from thinking a bit about the users that we are not getting, which is, for example, machine learning and some of the material science environments. But then also from others is we need much greater GPU resources. Kind of turned a corner now in terms of software that can make really efficient use of GPUs. I've been testing in the last 2 or 3 weeks the 2 big CFD codes, STAR CCM Plus and Fluent, on GPUs. There's still quite a bit of limitations in terms of it's particularly difficult to move to a situation where you're running across more than one node. You can use more than one GPU on a single node. Running on multiple nodes is turning out to be quite difficult to do, but there should be ways of making that work. But then also the actual capabilities in these codes are still a little bit limited. They're limited to the much lower memory footprint segregated solvers. Everybody in CFD will know what I'm talking about here, rather than the more modern coupled solvers, perhaps. And only some of the physical models that are included in these codes are working. But they are available in the latest versions of those 2 codes. They've been tested on Lengao, and the performance is impressive. These things are fast. These solvers run entirely on GPU now. They're not just using GPU for part of the calculation, and speed ups in the range of around 1 GPU card being equivalent of at least 6 Lengao nodes, possibly up to 10 or 11 Lengao nodes, depending on which code and which model you're running. So it's getting to the point where the advantages are compelling, which means that we need to respond to that with more GPU resources. And then a separate recommendation, and I don't really know where we go with that, but it needs to be taken up seriously at some level with the authorities, is what's going on between academia and the commercial world. We cannot continue producing lots and lots of graduates with masters and PhD degrees in specialized computational sciences going on to do whatever it is they do in the companies that they're going to work for that does not involve any kind of computing work. Right, so those are the chief takeaways from that resource, and I'd be interested to hear if you've got any questions to ask about that. I see Aaron's just got a question.
Yeah, Charles, just coming back to your point on the request for a friendlier UI, I think the only point to make there is that I guess the conundrum between power users that want to work with scripts and really know how to do this, and if I may call them so, desktop users who prefer a nice GUI, it doesn't need to be an either-or decision. It is fairly simple to run both those setups. So if this is something where you get more requests, look, if it's one, I take your point. We're not going to break our heads over it. But if this is something that you get more requests for, we can accommodate both with the kind of stuff that you already have at your disposal.
Yes, to which I've got to add, of course, we have sort of developed ways, and I use them a lot myself, to run with the GUIs on the cluster, primarily for setting up runs on the cluster, and then still going back to editing manually a script to actually run the jobs. But for setting up the runs and using GUIs for pre and post processing on the cluster, that's already possible. There are ways, if we want to spend time and money on it, to make that a little bit more streamlined. To get to the point of actually submitting jobs on the cluster with a single click of a button, that needs a lot more effort. And I know Altair has been pushing us for years to do more and more of this, and it's been a little bit lower on our list of priorities. But I guess, as Aaron points out, it rather depends on what the demand for that is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think Altair has done the work to give you the one button submit, but it is something that you have to decide whether your user community actually needs it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the message is that if there is a user interface that exists for your particular application, say on the environment that we provide, by all means, we will go out of our way to try and make it work for you. I don't think it should be seen as a message that we are not in favor of making this kind of service available. So I think, yeah, so thanks, Alex, also for pointing that out. But I just want to say, thanks, Charles, for presenting this. I mean, when I listen to this now again, I trust that people will agree that it gives us a very good or a clear picture, at least from a private sector user interface or perspective on what people are experiencing. And I think many of the topics may want or may prompt more discussion that we may not even have time or necessarily the opportunity to discuss here. So Charles, just to confirm, you will make that presentation also available to everybody on this call. Please, if some people want to go and look at this again, if not in this chat, at least in say email communication or so, if you want to go and look at it, you're most welcome. And then use this as a basis to discuss further. I'm just looking at some of the chats, and Krishna, I think you bring up an important point there where you say we have things that help users to submit jobs to the cluster without really knowing much. I think it's a general maybe comment that I want to make. Yes, of course, we have a wiki that explains in detail how things work, but the CHPC has also gone through quite a transition in the last few years. Well, it is now 2 years at least with COVID, where we had to transition to online learning for our training programs. And in this process, we have developed a lot of material, especially when we are focused on inexperienced users. So if it's basic things like Linux and even Python training modules and things like that, we are very well geared to support users if they want in their own time to go and do a few things. So even in the private sector, public sector space, if there's users that can benefit from this, please talk to us so that we can see how our own on-site developed training can help. And in many cases, this is specific to our system to get users to use it more optimally. So Krishna, I hope I'm conveying the message, but you're welcome to make a comment, Krishna, if you want to add anything. Krishna,
no, I think you can add everything.
You don't want to add. Okay, so then it's good. But Krishna is very heavily involved in developing these training materials and also actually hosting this training. So Krishna is also somebody to talk to if you want to have more information. I don't know, the agenda is basically done. We are at an open discussion, and I was hoping that the feedback on the survey will also pick some topics or your interest to raise some topics. So the floor is open to any questions or comments that you want to make. Quinn, you're most welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much, Werner and Charles and everybody who's presented today. It's been extremely interesting. I just have a couple of comments about we're talking about this disconnect in usage and usage models between industry and academia. And it's, I think Charles's review and especially Stephanie's presentation and comments afterwards really articulated something that's been wandering around a bit half formed in my head for a while, which is, it's this sort of how much is enough question. And, in the case of, for example, the South African Weather Service is a good one. There's no point in doing more and more and more ensemble simulations beyond the 18 or whatever that they're currently using, because the quality of the thing you're actually the answer you're trying to get, which is the prediction of the weather, doesn't really get any better, and it might actually get worse. And they understand those limitations really, really well. And I think it's much the same when we come to most industrial users. It's, like the engineering world that I live in is a good example. When we're working as a commercial business, we're driven strongly by constraints, constraints on time, on money, on resources and people, and many other things. And so we're constantly asking ourselves that question of how much is enough when it comes to getting the engineering answer that we want from a simulation. But then I go home in the afternoon and I hang up my industry hat and I put on my academic propeller head, and then the drivers are completely different. There I'm suddenly looking for answers, for understanding, for intuition and insight, and all of those sort of other drivers fade into the background a bit. I start worrying much less about how fast or fit for purpose I can run a model or a simulation, and I start worrying much more about how I can do the highest fidelity simulation possible within the limits of my core hours and HPC resources and things like that. So I think also in the research world, we don't, also quite often a bit at the bleeding edge of these kind of modeling processes and things like that. And we don't always understand how to optimize a model to get exactly what we want, to get to the answers we want. Whereas in industry, the models are often much more standardized and better understood. And people generally have quite a good handle on the uncertainties and that classical sort of accuracy performance trade-off. So I sort of sympathize with sort of how do we get this number up past 1%. And I think Charles made an interesting comment, is that this is probably something we need to benchmark against the rest of the world to see, you know, is this normal or is it not? And that might tell us whether or not we're actually doing something wrong, or whether we're actually just facing almost a universal challenge in the disconnect that's not going to sort of be very easily resolved. Just some thoughts.
Thank you very much, Quinn. I agree. This is things that we are thinking about, and we've been observing over a long time. So yeah, so we don't have the answers, but we appreciate your thoughts. Imran, you are welcome.
Hi, Werner. Just something it's interesting, and I think Robin has also touched on perhaps some of this. It's something that, you know, people take for granted, but, you know, when we have license servers sitting either within our organization or somewhere in the cloud, accessing it from the CHPC is sometimes problematic, and it's not from the CHPC side. I mean, I can give you an example of, you know, in the past year where we wanted to run some simulations, but we couldn't because of some internal IM changes that happened without our knowledge. You know, and it's those kinds of things that, you know, it's sometimes extremely frustrating to resolve. I mean, this is, as I said, it's got nothing to do with the CHPC. You know, and these things do come up in the corporate environment where someone in IM makes a decision which is great for their reasons, but is completely unsuited to the CHPC type applications. Anyway, just wanted to mention that was one of the issues that we had over the past year or so.
Yeah, well,
thanks for bringing. Yeah, Charles, I want you to comment, because I think this is an important topic to bring up, but also maybe looking to Robin's question there. Robin, I assume you're referring to Fluent specifically, so maybe we can just chat about that a bit, Charles. Thanks.
Yes, I was just going to point out that that Robin had asked a question about what do we do with licensed servers, and the short answer is it's difficult. We have a recipe that works, which is we set up SSH tunnels out from the cluster to your license server somewhere else. The problem with that is that your license server needs to be visible to the internet, and that is very often at IT level. In an organization, it's a bit of a problem. Very often it's a no-no. So the neat answer is the one that Siemens came up with, where they host a license on the cloud, and then we just have to have a tunnel out to that cloud license server, and you check out the license using a 22-character key. And frankly, this is the best thing since sliced bread. And I really, really, really wish the other software vendors would do the same thing. So Ansys has something similar in the form of the Elastic Cloud license. So basically what happens here is that we run an Ansys license server inside our system, but that license server also has internet access to the outside world. And then you can check out your license hosted on the Elastic Cloud server via our license server. So once again, there are codes and security involved in making this work. So we've done this with Michael Byler working in Namibia, who's had this particular requirement. So it's not quite as easy, but actually we made life for ourselves difficult when we first started testing it, because it's actually easier to use than we anticipated. It basically just works out through our license server, checking out that particular license from the Ansys Elastic Cloud license. And probably if you're dealing with Ansys, that will be the easiest way, because otherwise you have to deal with your own companies' IT and get them to make the 2 licensed ports available to the outside world. So these are not privileged licensed ports. Well, these 2 ports are not privileged, so they don't represent a security risk, and you can easily firewall it only for traffic coming to and from the CHPC. So actually the security risk is 0, but you need an IT operator in your company that understands that and is prepared to set it up that way. Failing that, all I can say is lean on the software companies, because this is one that's not under our control. So Robin also asked the resources of the Express queue. So for commercial users, that allows you to use up to a maximum of 2,400 cores at a time. It's at the 2nd highest priority, and you've got maximum run times of up to 96 hours. So this generally gets the thing done. The only time it fails to get the thing done is when you've got a very big excess of demand over supply in terms of computing facilities, like we had last week. But for the most part, it works because the only higher priority queue is the weather service preemptive queue. So this generally gets the jobs to the front of the queue. And as I say, you've got the same kind of access to the same kind of resources that you would have on the large queue under the normal queue.
Thanks, Charles, for those comments. I think when it comes to commercial software, yeah, sorry, Robin, I wanted to give you an opportunity to indicate whether you are satisfied or whether you need some more discussion. Robin,
from my take, in terms of the benefit for me, or from my perspective of the CHPC, is essentially cost. We obviously have an in-house HPC capacity. We're in the process of expanding that in-house. Our machine is about 9 years old, so it's starting to die. And we want to replace it with something probably 5 times more powerful. We do have access to clouds, HPC providers in a seamless way because they sit on the same tenant. So it's really just would be a benefit of cost rather than anything else. My time also has some value. So if I have to spend a lot of time making things happen, it annoys me because I've got plenty of other things to do, as you can imagine.
Thanks, thanks, Robin, for those comments. I see Jesse has also put a comment there from QFinSoft. Thanks, Jesse, for also making the comment about the elastic units from ANSYS that can be used. But I think in general, I just want to say that when it comes to commercial software, and whether it is setting up licenses through SSH tunnels or hosting the software license at our site, all those possibilities we are already doing in some way for certain packages. And Krishna also made the comment about licensing. So we are doing whatever we can from a CHPC perspective, but unfortunately, sometimes it is influenced by external matters. But you can be assured of our commitment to try and make it work. I don't want to miss over anything. Anton, I saw you made a comment as well about extension of a job time. Yeah, I mean, this is just in general. When it comes to wall times, all our queues, of course, do have wall time settings. I think the Express queue is a quite favorable wall time setting. But for some people, the longest possible wall time, even going for weeks, is what they want, which unfortunately is not practical for us to provide. But we are very much open. If you are dealing with a particular job that is now running much longer than anticipated, and you're going to run out of wall time, and you really don't want to restart, it's as simple as putting in that help desk ticket for us to extend. The only case where we will really not extend a particular request is when the capacity of or demand on resources is so severe that we cannot accommodate your request. But coming back to private sector users specifically, there's almost no chance that we will not extend it. So please just ask the question if you need it. Yeah, I hope I'm not missing some important things. For time, I must apologize. We seem to use all the time, but I'm encouraged by people staying online and that the topics that we are addressing is of value. Is there anything else that somebody wants to raise? Of course, the discussion never stops here. We have these sessions once a year, maybe more to remind everybody that we are ready to discuss and support you. But if there's anything else that anybody wants to mention, you are welcome. Otherwise, we can wrap up. Janine, yes.
There's something that has come up. If I could just speak for a moment.
Thanks, Charles. Janine, just hang on a second. Yes, Charles.
My colleague Anton has come up with an intriguing suggestion whether we should have some kind of platform for exchanging information, either with a blog or a wiki or something, where PIs, industry users, can add useful information they have for others to see. So obviously this idea would have to be developed a lot further, but is there any kind of appetite for that sort of idea? You know, it follows a little bit from what the question we had much earlier on about the commercial world finding out a bit more about interesting stuff happening in the academic world. What are we doing to promote that? And also just for the commercial PIs themselves, if they've got information they want to share with others. And so there's a bit of a competitive thing involved here. So it's an intriguing suggestion. Is there any appetite for that kind of idea?
Yeah, anybody is welcome to comment
okay,
or respond maybe to Charles offline. Thanks, Quinn, for the comment. But I wanted to, Janine, just an opportunity, Charles, to just
certainly
comment. Thanks, Janine.
Actually, on that, Charles, I'm wondering, but yeah, just correct me if I'm missing something that already exists. But I get a lot of my information, my help, just from the general forums, like the Stack Exchange and that kind of thing, for different codes. And I'm wondering, do we have something like that for the CHPC? Because that could potentially be useful if I mean, Charles, your support is second to none, but that might take a bit of load off you if someone who's done something similar before can maybe answer, so that because I'm constantly, I feel guilty for bugging you about like really small things, and if I just can't figure it out, then I just email Charles, and I think if everyone does that, it might be a little overwhelming.
Well, I have to do something to earn this enormous salary that I get paid. Seriously, yes, I think this ties in very, very closely, I think, to what Anton suggested there. We haven't really thought this through. There has been a suggestion in the last couple of days, actually, in another meeting, that this kind of idea has been raised, and I think it makes sense. We tried a little bit of this a while back with Slack. There is actually a Slack channel for CHPC users. We haven't really publicized it, but it does actually exist. So where people on Slack, CHPC users can discuss things on Slack. Louis is quite a prolific user of that in relative terms. But we could maybe start this off with the Slack, because it does open up that possibility. We haven't really promoted it or publicized it, because I'm pretty sure most of you are not aware of that. So I think we should make a point of maybe getting out an email to all the CHPC users, inviting them to use the Slack channel, where they can exchange ideas amongst themselves. In others, because it makes no real difference for me where I respond to requests, whether it's on email or by phone or by help desk, but you're limited to what I can tell you and when I'm available to do that. But whereas if you, and the same goes for the rest of us doing the user support work. But if you are, if you could benefit from exchanging information with the other users, actually the Slack channel is probably the right place to do that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think this is one of the take-home messages that I'm getting, and how we implement something like this, we can still talk about. The Slack channel, I think, is something that existed for a long time, and we see it maybe more as an unofficial, say, way to find information. If it works for you, it's good. officially, yeah, we want things to be locked properly, say through help desk and so on. But Charles, I think let's put heads together also with others at CHPC how to make this a bit more accessible and known out there, and how we can offer this. I mean, especially now with everybody working virtual, people have just become more and more used to this kind of thing. And of course, you are seeing it work in other environments. Certainly, it can work for CHPC as well. So yeah, we will definitely give attention to this. So thanks, Janine, for also pointing that out.
Okay, I also wanted to ask something else, and again, this is something that I've asked Charles about, and he has answered me. But I thought maybe it's something that could benefit some of the other users. Is we've had a brief conversation about how to request extra nodes because we're limited to 10, right? Or 10, yeah, 10 nodes. Yeah, just forgive me if I get all the lingo wrong here. Because how many CPUs and how many nodes, that's not necessarily my area of expertise. But in any case, so, I just wanted to clarify, so the process for that, how do you guys decide who's allowed to get a few extra nodes, and how does that sort of structure work? If, I don't know.
Maybe I can just. Oh, you want to go first, Charles? You can if you want. Otherwise, I can.
So as commercial user, you're entitled to the express queue. You just have to ask for it. So if you send me a help desk request, or send CHPC a help desk request that you need access to the express queue, we will give you permission to use the express queue, and then you can get access to more nodes, and you get access to higher priority, provided you keep on paying. If you're not doing this with your commercial hat, if you're doing it from the academic side, because I know you've been an academic user as well, then you need to show to us that the code that you're using and the kind of problems that you're using, that you will benefit from having more than 10 nodes, and then you can get up to 100 nodes on the large queue. We don't want to discourage people from using the large queue. We want people to use the large queue because that's what we're there for. But we need to make sure that those people who use the large queue know how to use it and can run cases that benefit from it.
I think that you're just saying what I wanted to make a more general comment. Whether you're from private sector or academia, we want more people to make use of the large queue. Because remember, we are saying that if you have a code that scales well beyond 10 nodes, by all means, you must come onto the large queue so that you can get better throughput. What we're just preventing is people dabbling on the large queue that can and try to use codes that do not scale, because then we are losing resources in that way. But for the CHPC, we have too little users of our large queue, and we are encouraging you to come. This is I would like to think is the true purpose of CHPC, is to provide people with access to real multi-core and multi-node usage of a system where they have no other place to be able to do it. So I hope that answers you, Janine, but please just talk and we can sort out if there's any more specific things.
No, that's fine. No, it's good to hear.
Good. So yeah, we are now officially over our time. I don't want to stifle any more urgent discussions, but I see there's a few messages going on. We might not need repeating here. But maybe I can end off and say thank you very much to everybody. Most people have stayed online for the full 3 hours. We really appreciate it. I take it as a sign that people appreciate these engagements, even though we're only doing it once a year. And I want to thank everybody that's participated, people that's presented, and the comments that's being made. But the true value, I think, of this is if it stimulates you to now start asking more questions and follow up about particular topics, please do not hesitate. Come to us, talk to us, make your suggestions, and we are there to support. I think there's a low base that we would like to increase also to get new users of this, say, public and private sector on board. So we really need to understand how to do this properly. So yeah, Charles, you will share that slides of yours, and we will also get a link to this recording available to you all. I'm not sure whether we really have everybody's email addresses. Most people have registered, so we will go according to that list. But my and Charles's email addresses are in the slides that I presented. So please just send a message there if you need anything that you think you are missing. So yeah, let me end it there. Thank everybody and keep well. We're looking forward to future engagements with you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
You can close it there. Thanks
very much, everyone. Good day. Ciao.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.